All right, good morning, everybody. We're going to ask you to go ahead and find your seats so we can get started in just a minute here. All right, good morning. Welcome to the 22nd Annual State of the Region Conference. My name is Dr. Nicole Pfeiffer. I'm the Director of the Center for Regional Development and the host of this event. A few little housekeeping things before we get started. One, there are exits on both ends of the ballroom. So in the event of emergency, obviously you can use both, but also there are restrooms and seating facilities in each end. So if you need to take a phone call or you need a quiet moment, please feel free to exit on either side. Please help yourself to as much food as you can. It's paid for, I hear it's better quality than last year, so let's see. I also would like to direct your attention to the tabletops. We have a small table tent on each table with a QR code, and that is a little survey for us about the event. We would appreciate your feedback on the venue. We know it's a new location. Thank you for coming out. The food, the parking, all of those things. So if you have some time throughout the course of the morning to click that QR code, give us some feedback. Additionally, on the tables, we have some materials about some exciting programs happening at Bowling Green State University and through the Center for Regional Development, so feel free to take a gander at those. All right. To begin, I want to just say thank you to our sponsors. We have 6 platinum sponsors this year. Spectrum, our second year platinum sponsor, thank you for your contributions. CNI, Buckeye Broadband, the Toledo Lucas County Public Library, AT&T, and Orba, all at the platinum level. And they all have some vendor tables out in the lobby here, so please take some time throughout the day to go check out their tables and see what they have to offer. In terms of gold and silver, we have Summit Financial, a new sponsor, as well as the City of Toledo Department of Development. And in our friends in bronze, we have Wood County Economic Development, Fishbeck, and BG Economic Development. To kick us off, a little word from our first platinum sponsor, Spectrum.
This is Spectrum. A wide range of ideas, a broad scope of solutions. Ideas that inspire innovation and advance technology. Solutions like delivering superior products and service to more than 32 million customers in 41 states. Spectrum is connecting more people to fast, reliable internet and Wi-Fi, providing crystal clear HDTV, and expanding our voice capabilities to include mobile phone service to meet the demand for a better wireless experience. Our drive to deliver superior service goes far beyond the home. Spectrum provides powerful network support and advertising solutions to help businesses, large and small, reach their goals. We're in your neighborhoods, covering the local stories and events with exclusive 24/7 news and sports programming. We have more than 93,000 well-trained, dedicated employees. From military veterans to those just entering the workforce, to a new generation of pioneers and creators, Spectrum offers dynamic career opportunities to a diverse range of talent. Our dependable, nearly 800,000-mile network is fueling new ideas, energizing new endeavors, and empowering our customers to achieve their full potential. This wide range of ideas, this broad scope of solutions, this is Spectrum.
Thank you, Dr. Pfeiffer. I'm Brian Young, Director of Government Affairs for Charter Communications. Most people know us better as Spectrum, and we're pleased to be a sponsor again this year at the State of the Region. It's my pleasure to introduce the 12th President of Bowling Green State University, Rodney K. Rogers. President Rogers serves on the Executive Committee and the Board of Directors of the Regional Growth Partnership, the Board of Directors of the United Way of Greater Toledo, and is a member of the Council of Competitiveness and the Ohio Business Roundtable. In addition, he serves as chair of the Council of Presidents of the Inter-University Council of Ohio. Please help me welcome President Rogers.
Thanks for hosting us. Brian, thank you very much. And boy, that was a longer introduction than needed, certainly. So welcome to the 22nd Annual State of the Region Conference. And I thank you very much for joining us here on the campus of Bowling Green State University. I certainly want to thank the Center for Regional Development, Dr. Pfeiffer, Nicole, wherever you went, oh, right over there. Thank you very much. You and your team worked hard to put this conference together that is incredibly important for our region. Why is it important? Because it allows us to bring leaders together, like all of you in this room, to talk about our region, the economy of our region, making sure that this region is robust, the rural, urban, all of our region has opportunities to be successful and participate in a robust economy. And this is an important topic that we have today about advanced technologies. You know, I'm struck how important it is to have this conversation today on a college campus. You know, there's been a lot of discussions about higher ed and the role that higher ed plays in our economy and in our communities. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the importance that educational anchor institutions like Bowling Green State University plays in our economy here in our region, but throughout the state. But you know, you don't have to take my word for it. The Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia actually just came out with a new study. It's on their website. It's fascinating to go to it. And it talks about anchor institutions, education, as well as medical systems. EDS and MEDS is what they call it. But they talk about how those anchor institutions drive the resilience of so many regions of our country. Those two institutions together, EDS and MEDS, contribute $1.7 trillion in goods and services to the U.S. economy, and directly or indirectly supports about 18 million jobs. So that's 9% of U.S. employment. And so specifically, you can drill down into all of the MSAs throughout the country and throughout the regions here in Ohio and across the nation, of course. And so I looked at the Toledo MSA, for example, and looked at what they call the Reliance Index, which is the percentage of the economy that is driven by EDS and MEDS relative to the average of the United States throughout the nation. And the Toledo MSA, EDS and MEDS, came up with a benchmark of 1.4. The benchmark the average across the United States is 1, so 1.4. So in other words, EDS and MEDS benefits, in the Toledo MSA, benefits our region more than 40% on average over other regions of the United States. So higher ed is certainly a driver of our economy, and Bowling Green is a comprehensive public university. We are proud to be an anchor, certainly, of our region, not just for the employment and economic impact, but also in the research and innovation. And we know it's not just our students who are investing in us through their tuition, but it's the taxpayers as well. And I certainly want to thank all of our taxpayers that are here today for your support of higher education in this state. It is our responsibility to make sure we are a good investment of those taxpayers' dollars, and we take that very seriously. How do we do it? Well, we are investing in new academic programs and facilities to make sure we're meeting Ohio's workforce needs, whether it be aviation, engineering, computer and data science, and healthcare. Those things are driving our enrollment and continue to lead our growth as a university in terms of enrollment and economic impact. And we are very proud to partner with many, many, many different companies and industries to make sure that we have the co-ops, the internships, all sorts of those experiences that our students need. So when they come to this institution to study, connect, grow, and develop as professionals, they are ready to go out and have great careers too, and I hope work for many of your organizations that may be here together. Our work needs to be collaborative. We know we will be stronger and more successful when we collaborate with others, and that has absolutely been a key part of our strategic plan here at BGSU. And so today you're going to hear from speakers and panelists who are going to provide insights into how we continue to move our region forward. We believe that economic and regional development are so closely aligned and linked to education, public good, and service. In talking about public service in creating good, it's my pleasure to introduce someone who has a deep understanding of service and workforce development, and that would be Senator Rob McCauley. Senator McCauley represents the 1st Senate District, which includes Defiance, Hancock, Hardin, Henry, Fulton, Paulding, Putnam, Van Wert, and Williams County, and part of Logan County. Did I mention Hardin County? Oh yeah, I'm a native of Hardin County, okay? So Senator McCauley represents my home county as well. But he also serves as the Senate Majority Floor Leader. And Senator McCauley has served in both the Senate and the House, holding leadership roles in both. He has an absolutely deep understanding of the role education plays in workforce development. Having served in the Community Improvement Corporation of Henry County, where he oversaw economic development efforts for the county and worked to improve local workforce development efforts between manufacturers and schools in Henry and Williams County. Senator McCauley was also key in allowing us to create a Center for Advanced Manufacturing, which was a partnership between Owens Community College, Bowling Green State University, and the University of Findlay. Tim Miley is our executive director, and we want to thank Senator McCauley for his support. But I would also be remiss if I didn't mention that Senator McCauley is also a fellow father to twin boys. My twin boys, who are in their 20s, Senator McCauley's sons are a little bit younger, okay? But I can assure you that the house will never get less rambunctious, okay? So that's great preparation for service, don't you think, being a father of twin boys? Ladies and gentlemen, Senator Rob McCauley.
Thank you, President Rogers, and welcome all of you to this conference. Even though he was upset at the length of the remarks that introduced him, I'll say a little bit more about President Rogers. He's certainly a practical and pragmatic, thoughtful leader, and that's what we need here in Northwest Ohio. Somebody, obviously, due to his roots, who's committed to Northwest Ohio, and you can see that when you talk to him about what his vision is for Bowling Green State University's role in the future of Northwest Ohio. And it's fitting that we're here to talk about bridging the digital divide, because obviously we've all probably noticed over the last 5 years or so the rapidly changing landscape of our economy, not just nationally, not just statewide, but here, even in Northwest Ohio. From a statewide perspective, 10 years ago, we never would have thought that we would have been able to compete for a chips plant like Intel. We never would have thought that we would have been able to compete for other mega projects like the Honda battery plant and others a short time ago. But all of us remember what it was like 4 or 5 years ago when all of our lives changed, and all of us were forced to conduct business online, conduct meetings on Zoom. All of our kids were forced online as well, for those of us who have school-age kids. And how many of us at the time said, we're never doing another Zoom meeting ever again? And now all of a sudden, that's all seemingly that we do. But that's the new economy that we're all going to have to be a part of going forward. And so that's what really makes the topic of today, bridging the digital divide, all the more important, because it's something that we all have to realize is here to stay. It's something that we all have to realize that in order for our economy to take that next step, to move into this century, to really embrace the changing realities that we have to deal with, we have to embrace the fact that we need reliable, high-speed internet. We need more connectivity, no matter where you live. Because what we're noticing, even at the state level, is an increasing amount of people deciding, because they can work remotely, because they can be educated remotely, an increasing amount of people deciding, I'm going to choose the place where I want to live rather than the place I want to work. And they're going to raise their family where they want to live, even if they may work technically 150, 200 miles away, or in some cases, even more. And it's not, most professions aren't immune from that, unless, of course, it's something that must be done physically on site at a facility. And so what has the state done to address some of these issues? You know, we realized pretty quickly what I had said earlier, particularly through the leadership of Governor DeWine and Lieutenant Governor John Husted. We realized pretty quickly after the realities we were faced with through the pandemic that we needed to step up our game, that there were pieces of Ohio across the entire state, whether it be in an urban area, a suburban area, or a rural area, that desperately lacked connectivity, that desperately lacked high-speed internet, areas that without a change, without a rapid injection of broadband capabilities in those areas, they were areas that in this new economy were going to be left behind. And so it was in 2021, with that budget, obviously fresh in our minds, what we had been dealing with at that point, that the state decided to put $250 million into Broadband Ohio in an effort to create a grant process for communities across the state of Ohio to be able to take advantage of those dollars and enhance their own connectivity. One thing that we saw from that is obviously much of it was very much based on need-based applications, and much of that money went to an area of Ohio that so desperately needed it, and that was in Appalachia. For those of you who have been down to Appalachia, you know, we enjoy very flat, easy to navigate landscapes here with square grid mapping for all of our roads in our county rural areas. Down in Appalachia, that is not the case. For those of you who have never really driven too much out of Northwest Ohio, I can tell you when you're in Appalachia, going around narrow roads, around corners and white knuckling it, it's a little bit of a different experience. But it's that same topography that makes it a little bit more different and difficult to enhance the broadband capabilities of those areas. Naturally, a signal doesn't travel as well over hills and small, what we would call up here maybe small mountains, but they don't call it that down here, but hills and hollers and rolling hills and whatnot, and also not around wooded areas, obviously. So they needed the money desperately just to get basic connectivity down there. That's where the initial injection of funding went. But when we look at what we did in this most recent operating budget, myself personally and many others were part of the conversation to make this a solution that would impact all of Ohio. A solution that would allow areas of the state that lacked broadband connectivity to be able to benefit from the next round of funding. And I can tell you the next round of funding coming from the federal government is the BEAD funds. $750 million roughly is going to be coming to the state of Ohio to expand broadband capability. And when we worked on the program that would establish how these dollars would be divvied up, again, we wanted to make sure that it would benefit all of Ohio based on need for broadband. Because obviously anybody who's from across Northwest Ohio, you realize whether you live in Lucas County or whether you live in Paulding County, you know there are parts of our places that we call home that desperately need broadband internet, that desperately need that connectivity in order to survive in an ever-changing economy. And the thing that we have to offer up here that many other places may not is we also have the sense of place. And so I talked a little bit earlier about the communities that people are choosing to live in. Naturally, we have the ability with the type and quality of life that we can offer people up here to be able to attract people back to this area to live, work, and raise their family. We can also attract people to start their own business. And yes, we can even allow our existing citizens to take advantage of these capabilities and to educate themselves at Bowling Green State University or other universities or colleges which they may choose to spend their education dollars. It's important that we do this, and it's important that we do it the right way. Another emphasis in the grant funding going forward will be on gig symmetrical internet. This is fiber, something that we previously thought would be unattainable. There would be no business case for installing fiber in many of the rural areas of our districts or of Northwest Ohio. But that is a possibility with these grant dollars and with the technology that's changing and with many of the companies that are in the landscape right now. Wanting to put fiber in rural parts of counties, in areas that would make no sense as short as 2 or 3 years ago, it's now a reality. It's now a reality that we can all expect to have happen with the injection of these dollars, and it's now a reality with companies that are sponsoring the events here today, that we will have reliable broadband internet, and we will be able to move into this new economic era in the state of Ohio with confidence and vigor that we'll be able to compete on the global economic stage. Thank you all for taking an interest in today's program. Enjoy your conference. Thank you for having me.
Unreliable telecom services cost your business time, money, and productivity. At CNI, we provide the essential telecom services and comprehensive support system your company needs to remain online 24/7.
When they come to us and they ask us how can they improve their connectivity or how can they improve their uptime, we're able to answer those questions. We're able to provide them with those solutions.
Partnering with CNI allows you to meet all your telecom needs in one trusted vendor, so you can optimize your customer experience, secure your data, and focus on growing your business. Our core services include fiber internet, call center support, network monitoring and support, ABR video streaming, and CALIA compliance. Since 1993, we have been transforming how companies use technology. Businesses in healthcare, government, education, as well as internet service providers and carriers have partnered with CNI. You deserve reliable services and a comprehensive support system built to serve you and your customers no matter where the market takes you.
One of the biggest differentiators between CNI and competition is just the flexibility and the knowledge of our staff. Pretty much anybody who answers the phone, you're maybe one person away from the expert. If not, you got the expert on the phone right when that phone rang the first time.
Explore more at cniteam.com and see how you can keep your company online all the time.
Good morning, everyone. How are you? My name is Tina Contini. I'm an account executive with CNI, and it's a great honor to be introducing the presenter of the State of the Region Address, Dr. Nicole Pfeiffer. Before that, I'd like to give you a little background. Dr. Pfeiffer's current position is the BGSU's Director for the Center of Regional Development. Dr. Pfeiffer is a seasoned researcher, strategist, and facilitator and project manager with extensive experience in public health, community development, and public policy. She has a diverse background in higher education, government, and the nonprofit sectors. With the support of her CRD team, Dr. Pfeiffer assists communities in regional development through fostering collaborative and supportive strategic community-level planning, inclusive community-level planning, and decision-making and providing evaluation assessment services. Dr. Pfeiffer's work at the CRD focuses on issues surrounding community health and well-being, along with public service delivery, access of quality of life with a focus on the economic development. Dr. Pfeiffer holds a PhD in public policy from Wayne State University and a master's in public administration from Bowling Green State University. Prior to her work with the CRD, Dr. Pfeiffer was a professor, researcher, and program director at Washington, Jefferson College, and Northwestern University. Prior to her academic career, Nicole served as a public affairs and public relations officer for the U.S. National Park Services, where she was a recipient of 4 public service awards, including the National Partnership Award. Wow, she has been a busy woman. I would like to ask all of you to provide a warm welcome for our presenter today, Dr. Nicole Pfeiffer.
Okay. All right. Well, that's not any better. Okay. Good morning. So before we begin, I would just like to quickly present my team. A big thank you to the CRD staff sitting over here. Everybody please stand. They've done tremendous amount of work to put this event together. And everything that you see is a product of this entire team. Even this presentation, though I'm presenting it, was a team effort. So thank you guys. All right. So the State of the Region address. First, a quick little note on CRD, if you are not familiar with the Center for Regional Development. So we are a community-facing organization at Bowling Green State University that is focused on regional development, strategic planning, data analysis, and community supports of various types. We are an EDA University Center, which means that we get some funding from the US EDA. We are one of 3 in the state of Ohio. There's one in Cleveland State and one at OU, and so this is our service area in Northwest Ohio. When I present the data, we will focus on this service area. You may notice that this is a little bit larger than we usually conceive of as Northwest Ohio, and that is because of our reach as a university center. A note on the data that I'm going to present today. Most of the data that I will provide is public data, meaning it's coming from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, from the BEA, from the ACS, and various other public sources, but we also do use proprietary data as well. And so the sources for that proprietary data are Metopio, Statista, and Lightcast. All right, let's get to the regional indicators. So the first thing that we're looking at is job growth in the state of Ohio. This slide shows you last year's map for job growth and this year's. So they're each a 5-year span, 2018 to 2022, 2019 to 2023. What you see highlighted in red are counties that have seen job losses. What you see highlighted in blue are counties that have seen job growth, and everything that looks sort of gray is in that very sort of neutral area, so a very slight gain or a very slight loss. At a glance, you can see we've done better, right? We've done better in the last 5 years, meaning that in the last year, we've seen some significant improvement. Many less counties seeing job losses than previously. In the previous year, we only saw 16 counties with job gains. This year, we're seeing 20. All right, so looking just at this year's data, we can see that these are the top growth counties for the whole state. So Wood, Madison, Licking have the greatest net gains, seeing over 5,000 jobs each. Warren and Delaware follow, Warren having 4,000 and Delaware 3,600. Except for Madison and Piqua, all of the gains that we saw in terms of percentage were between 2 and 5% job gains. Madison had 26%, so a relatively large gain, and Piqua had 11.3. In terms of the losses, so 31 of the 54 that saw losses less than 3%. So even though we did see losses, they were very small in comparison. No county saw losses over 8%. When we hone in just in our Northwest Ohio region, again, you see that most of the counties that were our state top growth areas are also our regional top growth areas. Again, when we look at that comparison of the 5-year time span, we see that net improvement, right? Far few red counties, and the red counties are much lighter, meaning that we've seen more job gains, more job loss, less job losses. Looking at the top performers for Northwest Ohio, I put all 7 that have seen gains up there for you. So our top gainer was Wood County in terms of sheer numbers, seeing 5,600 new jobs. Madison comes next, again, over 5,000. Delaware, 3,573. Union seeing, bumping down a little bit, seeing 359. Then Putnam, Wyandotte, and Logan all seeing gains in the hundreds. Okay. So now we look at the next few slides, we're going to look at job growth in particular sectors of the economy. So we always look at 3 sectors. We look at manufacturing, professional scientific services, and logistics transportation. So looking at manufacturing, we see that, again, job gains are broader than they were historically than they were in the 2018 to 22 data. Here we see that we have 485 jobs added in manufacturing in Huron County. Putnam County also saw about an 8% increase in manufacturing jobs with 289 jobs. Delaware added 415 jobs, about a 6.3% increase. And Wood and Seneca both saw 3% increases, adding 396 and 124 jobs respectively. Okay. So when we look at those professional, scientific, and technical services, again, we see a lot more job growth across the region. Only a few counties seeing job losses in this area, so that's excellent. We see the greatest increase in numbers concentrated in the few counties, including Delaware County, which had 987. Wood County with 482. We also see the highest percentage increases rather than net numbers in Madison, Henry, and Wyandotte counties, each seeing about a 36% increase. Mercer also saw a 29% increase, and Wood saw a 25% increase. The only counties seeing losses in scientific and professional services were Hardin, Hancock, and Lucas. Okay, and our third sector, looking at transportation and warehousing. Here we see a little bit more losses than we do gains. The top performing counties here are Madison, Wood, Union, Lucas, and Richland. Again, Madison leading with job ads at over 5,000. Wood coming in just under 5,000, doing relatively well. Lucas with 422. Did much better last year than this year, and then Richland with 269. Okay, looking at GDP growth. So not only do we care about the number of jobs that we're adding to our economy, but we care about the productivity of those jobs. So how much income are we bringing to the region? What does that look like? In terms of GDP growth, you see that Ohio is in the dark blue here, so the darker color is more GDP growth, the lighter blue color is less GDP growth. So Ohio is 6th in the nation in GDP growth for this last year. In 2022, the real gross domestic product for Ohio was $638 billion, which is a significant increase from the previous year when the state's real GDP was $629 billion. So Ohio comes just behind California, Texas, New York, Florida, Illinois, and Pennsylvania in terms of GDP growth. This is our growth over time since 2000. Obviously, you can see we have an upward trajectory. Last year was sort of a banner year. Last year, we saw about 5.9% GDP growth in Ohio, which is the most that we've seen since 2011. So that was kind of an anomaly in terms of the amount of growth at one time. This year, we have a much smaller gain at 1.5%, but again, continuing to build from last year's significant gain. So a good upward trajectory in GDP growth for the state. And of course, you see in 2019, there was a little bit of or 2020, you see a little bit of a shrinkage, and that is attributed to the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay. Okay, when we look at this GRP growth, so gross regional product across the state, again, we see the top counties for gross regional product being those often closer to the center of the state, where we're seeing a lot of that tech innovation growth happening in Columbus. So our top counties here are Franklin, Cuyahoga, Hamilton, Summit, and Montgomery in terms of GRP gains. So Franklin being the leader here, having 19 billion, I believe. Let me see. Yes, 19 billion in gains, and that's about 20%. Cuyahoga had 7 billion in gain, or 17 billion in gains, and 18%. Hamilton having 10 billion, 13.3%. Summit having 4.5 billion, 15%, and Montgomery having 3.7 billion and 13.5%. Overall, in terms of GRP gains for the state, we were looking at 86.5 billion total. Okay. Looking at Northwest Ohio, again, we see a lot of the same counties. Delaware, Lucas, Wood, Union, and Hancock being our top producers in the Northwest Ohio region. We've got Delaware coming in at 2.86 billion in gains, about 26%. Lucas, 2.7 billion, coming in at 11%. Wood County, 1.6 billion, coming in at 23.5%. Union at 1.5 billion, 27.5%, and Hancock coming in at 1.3 billion. Okay, when we look at the gross regional product then for our industry sectors, again, looking at manufacturing, scientific and professional services, and then finalizing with transportation logistics. We see that in terms of GRP gains in manufacturing, we've got Union County gaining over 1.5 billion in GRP, or 73%. Allen seeing an increase of 685 million from manufacturing over the past 5 years. Hancock, Lucas, Delaware, and Fulton counties all see a gain of 300 to 400 million, and Wood came in just at 230 million in terms of GRP gains. Except for Crawford and Madison, every county in the region saw GRP gains in manufacturing. Looking at the scientific professional services, again, we see lots of blue, meaning lots of growth. Widespread gains, an average county level increase of about 25%. Delaware County having the largest GRP increase at 257 million and a 25% gain. The next closest is Union County at 128 million, followed by Lucas at $105 million. The greatest percent changes were in Wyandotte, Shelby, Paulding, Knox, and Mercer, all with percentage increases between 40 and 50% growth in professional and scientific services. Only slight losses in Putnam and Morrow counties between 3 and 4%. Okay, looking at transportation warehousing, again, lots of growth here. Pale blue, so not tremendous in terms of percentage growth, but still growth pretty much across the board, with the exception of Logan and Auglaize, who saw losses in transportation and warehousing. 13 of the 31 counties saw GRP increases in this sector above 20%. The Lucas County saw a jump, bringing their 5-year average to 123 million. It was previously 72, so a pretty big jump there. Union, Richland, Mercer, Huron, and Delaware counties all saw modest gains between 30 and 50 million. And we see the largest in Hancock, Madison, and Wood, with gains of 320, 210, and 180 million, respectively. Looking at our regional workforce, As we know, workforce for us is really about population in a lot of ways, right? And I also think that job gains and our population gains have, we've seen some co-correlation with that, right? And we know that population is something that is continually an area of concern, particularly for our rural communities. Over the last 10 years, we've seen growth in the U.S. population mostly happening in the Mountain West and the Southeast and in Texas. Ohio has seen very modest population increase, approximately 217,000 new people over the past 10 years. We're looking at a 1.88% population increase. It's a little bit down from the last 10-year segment, but still seeing some modest growth. Very similar to our neighbors. Michigan has 1.5, Pennsylvania 2.3%, Kentucky 2.9%, and then Indiana doing a little bit better at 4.7% growth there. West Virginia and Illinois see the greatest decreases in the nation, looking at a 4.25% loss for West Virginia and a 2.3% for Illinois. When we look at population change across the state of Ohio, not surprisingly, we see the largest growth happening again in that Columbus region, also down by Cincinnati and a little bit up by Columbus around those major metros. The highest gaining counties are Union, Delaware, Warren, Fairfield, and Licking counties. This modest growth tends to be relatively narrowly distributed across the counties, unfortunately. As a percentage, Union County was the fastest growing county in the state with a 31% increase, followed by Delaware with a 25% increase, Warren at 26%, Fairfield at 11%, and Licking at 8% increase in population. When we look at Northwest Ohio, again, we see Delaware being our leader as the closest suburb of Columbus in our region. We also see those surrounding counties having the most growth. So Delaware, Union, Richland, Madison, and Marion having the greatest population increases. Delaware seeing 4,430. Union, 1,600, Richland, 636, Madison, 430, and Marion with 323. Okay, looking at unemployment. So unemployment numbers are largely low in our region and for the state. We see the lowest unemployment rates, again, in those lower corridors there, Mercer, Holmes, Wyandotte, Auglaize, Van Wert, and Delaware having our lowest unemployment rates. The ones that are in blue are lower than the state of Ohio unemployment rate, unadjusted. And then we see the ones in red that are above the Ohio unemployment rate. So currently, the unadjusted unemployment rate for the state is 3.1% as of December 2023, which is a little bit down from last year, which was 3.6 at this exact time. So we're seeing, again, sort of an overall decrease in the unemployment rate. Ohio is one of the 6 states with the lowest unemployment rates right now. Others include Maryland, Mississippi, North Dakota, Pennsylvania, and Vermont. The U.S. unemployment rate at the same time, December 2023, was 3.5%. So we are below the nation in terms of unemployment rate. Okay, so those counties that have are highlighted in blue again are those that have below that statewide average of 3.1%. And we have some pretty spectacularly low numbers in some of these counties, ranging from 1.8%, and then our highest is Monroe County with 5.8% unemployment. Okay, looking at labor force participation. Labor force participation means all of those who are capable of working who do. So this is folks over the age of 16, so 16 to retirement age, 65, 64, who participate, as a percentage, who participate in the labor market. We again see super high numbers here in comparison to most places. We have Wyandotte coming in at 74% labor force participation rate, which is very, very high. Delaware coming in at 71%, Putnam coming in at 70%, Mercer coming in at 70%, Auglaize 67%. Ohio's statewide rate is about 62%, 61.9. So, we have a lot of counties that are really coming far above the statewide average. The national labor force participation rate is 62.6%, which is a little bit up from last year where it was 62.3%. With the exception of Auglaize County, the top 5 are all the same as 2022, with Auglaize sort of displacing Hancock, who was our number 5 last year. Wyandotte has the highest labor force participation rate, as I said, in the 70%. Auglaize and Hancock have labor force participation rates in the 66%. Fulton, Wood, and Van Wert are looking at above 63%. And the counties with the lowest labor force participation rates are Marion, Richland, Hardin, and Crawford, all around 50 to 51%, below that state average. Okay. When we look at labor force participation rate, what is this? Sorry. Oh, the greatest increases, my apologies. So the ones that have seen the greatest increase in the last, again, year from previous years in terms of rate, Van Wert, Auglaize, Defiance, Seneca, and Shelby. The greatest increase being in Van Wert, a 2% increase, Auglaize 1.7, Defiance 1%, Seneca just under 1%, and same with Shelby 0.77. So overall, we see low unemployment, high labor force participation, and decent labor force participation increases over the last year. Continued recovery from the pandemic is surely underway. So the last bit of indicators I want to talk about in my time here are those about regional connectivity, since that is our topic of the day. I won't spend too much time getting into the nitty-gritty of this work because we have a lot of people scheduled to be talking about that throughout the course of the morning. But I did want to give you a little bit of insight about what our connectivity situation looks like in our region. For context, when we talk about connectivity, we are using the Broadband Ohio definition, which looks at connectivity through a couple of variables. So one is availability. That is having that line, that internet connection that goes to your home or your business. So the ability to tap into a provider's services is availability. We also have adoption, which means not only do you have access to that internet, but you have the ability to use it. And that includes affordability, meaning that you can pay for those services, and that you have digital literacy, which is the capability to use those services in a way that is beneficial to you, thinking about things such as internet safety and knowledge, et cetera. So when we look at broadband availability, again, talking about that access to your home or business, meaning that you can tap into services. This is the 2021 data from Broadband Ohio. And so what you see in this color schematic are the speeds of upload and download. And so red is the lowest, green is the highest. And so we see that a lot of areas in Northwest Ohio at this time are looking in the red and orange, right? And so that means that we may have connectivity, but those upload, download speeds are a little bit slower than optimal for your average uses. Once we get to that yellow and above, then we're in the optimal area for your sort of daily internet use. This is a little bit newer data coming from the FCC, and here you see the two shades of blue. The dark blue is showing areas that are meeting those minimum criterion for what we would call general applications, so the 320 over 25. And so you see a lot of Northwest Ohio coming in the dark blue with little patches of the lighter blue in some areas with white, which means that they're not having that coverage. So we see that availability is probably pretty good in most of our areas. Of course, we have some very rural components to our region, which has, the data looks a little bit different. The thing that I would say is most important that I think a lot of our speakers are going to talk about today is that when we look at availability, in aggregate, it looks pretty good. When we look at connectivity and adoption, in aggregate, it looks pretty good. But when we get down to those very small geographies, the zip code level, the neighborhood level, that's when things get a little bit more variable. And the work that we've done with the Toledo-Lucas County Public Library and with the RDIA, with Broadband Ohio, has shown that that's really sort of, the devil is definitely in the details when we're talking about connectivity. Our speakers from Toledo-Lucas County Public Library and from Broadband Ohio are going to talk to you about the RDIA work that we've doing, the Regional Digital Inclusion Alliance work. And so the region that we will be talking about in the context of that work is a little bit smaller than our typical service region, so I wanted to make sure that you had some context here, that in the context of Broadband Ohio, the region is that little bit smaller connectivity. And you can see the counties listed there. When we look at the sort of holistic summary of the data points that tell us how well connected or how well positioned for connectivity a county is, there's a myriad of variables that are used, including some demographic data about income, poverty, et cetera, and also some variables then about that actual connectivity, meaning the availability, the download, upload speeds, et cetera. Ruralness plays a tremendous part, again, in our region because of just the geography that we have. You see highlighted in blue Paulding and Putnam counties. Those are the two counties that tend to have the lowest scores in our region, and as you can probably guess, that has a lot to do with their geographic position in ruralness. ACP claims. ACP has been, as we know, this is a topic that is really important to a number of our local elected officials in our community. We know that there's a transition happening with this legislation and perhaps other programs that will take its place. But in any case, to show you the utilization in our region and the benefit that was brought by this internet support. So by being able to provide a relatively low-cost option to our residents in Northwest Ohio, we've seen tremendous access increases. So over $28 billion in monthly service support from the ACP. Our top two subscribing counties are counties where the most people were utilizing the services, Lucas County and Allen, and our bottom two, again, Putnam and Paulding. I wanted to give you a little snapshot of some of the RDI work we've been doing. We did these snapshots for every county in that region. I'm not going to go through all of them, but they are available to you in a couple of ways. But I wanted to show you Wood County since that's where we are today. And so you can see here all of those demographic pieces, including education rates, our population, our median household income. And then with the map, you can see that connectivity gradient, right? Where are the places, what are the upload, download speeds in these areas, and then you can see what proportion of people who have access are in fact tapping in, right? Who have an available connection are using that internet. So of the 23% that don't have access, or 23% don't have access in Wood County. I included Paulding and Putnam up here as well, since again, these are our areas that we know have struggled the most in terms of getting the services that they desire and need in that community. And again, you see that connectivity level is much, or the lack of service is much higher here, 62%, and then in Putnam, 64%. If you are interested in this data, you can access it through this QR code. This will take you directly to the RDIA report that we did, again, in conjunction with Lucas County Public Library. Lucas and Anna from Broadband are going to talk to you guys more about that work and what was done there. But if you want one of those county profiles for your county particularly, you can download it here, or we can get you a paper copy if you desire. We also have them printed out in our vendor table outside. So if you want to flip through them, those are available to you for your use. With that, if you have any questions, concerns, or things that you think we can help you with, please don't hesitate to contact us at CRD, and we are happy to support this community.
Teachers are everything to these kids, and not just for math and science, but for making sure they're doing okay. When COVID hit, all classrooms became virtual, so if a child didn't have access to the internet, it was like they disappeared. Buckeye developed a new product called Freenet for Schools. It's totally free without ads during school hours. These teachers are a lifeline, and our kids need to stay connected when it counts.
Dear God, there are 300 people in this room. Good morning. Good morning. Much better, much better. My name is Jeff Shook. I'm President General Manager for Buckeye Broadband. I think I have the distinct pleasure of introducing Angela Seifert today. Angela Seifert is the Executive Director of the National, we talked about the Regional Digital Inclusion Alliance. Angela is the Director of the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. She's been working in this field that we refer to as digital inclusion since 1997. Her efforts have ranged from physically setting up computer labs in underserved areas, managing local digital inclusion programs, to even consulting for the U.S. Department of Commerce. She's also testified before Congress. Angela develops national strategies and solutions from the ground up. In 2015, Angela helped found the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, and that's a unified voice for home broadband access, public broadband access, personal devices, and of particular passion for mine, technology training and support programs. Angela serves on the board of directors of the Schools, Health, and Libraries Broadband Coalition, and Government Technology Magazine named Angela one of their top 25 doers, dreamers, and drivers for 2019. So would you join me, please, in welcoming Angela Seifert to the stage. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Nice to see you. Nice to see you. Good morning. Boy, am I excited to be here. I'll stand up here because you can't really see me behind the podium. I should start bringing a stool with me when I go speak places. So I grew up in Allen County, outside of Lima. I went to school at the University of Toledo. My work now is nationals, but so it's really exciting to be here with you all and to see the work that I care about, this issue that's so it's what I do, right? There's nothing I'll ever to be able to do after this, because the pandemic drew so much attention to this issue. When I was at the University of Toledo, I was working with a professor there when I was in grad school, and we were asking local community-based organizations how it was the university could support their work. And one of the answers that came back was technology with their constituents. That's the digital divide, right? And this was almost 30 years ago. And that led then to interaction with a housing entity called Vistula Management that had a grant from HUD, and that grant had them setting up computer labs, and one of the principals there realized that it would be a lot stronger of an effort if there were others in the community working on this issue. And so we actually ended up forming one of the first coalitions in the country, which we called the Coalition to Access Technology and Networking in Toledo. And so I really my work is rooted in what I did in Toledo. So I'm very, very honored to be here with you, and thankful to Nicole and her team, particularly Lisa, for convincing me that I should do this with you all. This is Wanda Davis. Wanda is in Cleveland on the east side. About 25 years ago, she took her mom to the doctor, and her mom, they were in the waiting room, and the nurse comes and gets her mom and takes her mom back to do some paperwork. So Wanda's sitting in the waiting room waiting for her mom, and 15 minutes passes, 30 minutes pass, 45 minutes. She's like, where is my mom? So she goes back to find her mom, and her mom's sitting in front of a computer, just sitting. Mom, what are you doing? They told me to fill out paperwork. Wanda knew her mom didn't know how to use a computer, so her mom was just sitting in front of this computer not knowing what to do. Wanda, of course, not so pleased with that situation, recognized this is a huge problem for my community, and went on to found the Ashbury Senior Community Computing Center, which then taught older adults how to use technology and helped them get signed up for broadband service in their homes. So what Wanda created back then, and the work that I was doing in Toledo with all the fabulous folks there, were the beginnings of what we then called community technology. Now we might call digital inclusion, we might call it closing the digital divide. The terms that we use are important because it helps us to understand when we're talking to each other. One of the first things we did when we formed NDIA was to create definitions for these terms because we realized we were kind of talking past each other. NDIA is about 9 years old, and when we formed it, there was no money for it, there was hardly anybody paying attention to it, but it was on the ground. There were folks locally figuring out this issue. So we knew, those of us who were kind of paying attention to what was happening nationally, that policy was being made, and they had no idea folks like Wanda existed, no idea about that work in Northwest Ohio. So digital equity, that's the phrase that means let's get individuals and communities access to information communication technology so they can do whatever it is they need to do. So they can fully participate in society, democracy, economy. And this is important both for those individuals, but for our whole communities. Because we can't design systems based upon technology for the community. When there are some people not participating, it pulls everybody back. It raises the costs for everybody. Nationally, this is important because this is how we are globally competitive. If we're creating amazing technologies, but only some people can access them, we are really holding ourselves back. We're holding ourselves back in terms of the individual's work potential. And we're also holding ourselves back in healthcare, education, finance, all the things that matter. The term digital inclusion, this is the work. These are the programs like Wanda's. Programs like the Northwest Ohio Community Action Commission are those folks here. Hurrah for their Digital Navigator program, it's very impressive. Digital inclusion work is making sure folks have access to the technology. So this is affordable broadband service, because a broadband service, when you're on a tight income, that $60, $70 a month, it feels impossible. Nicole mentioned the Affordable Connectivity Program. This is a broadband subsidy that we have right now in the United States that happened because of the attention we got from the pandemic, and it's going to run out the end of April. Unless Congress acts, there's no more broadband subsidy in about a month and a half. Devices. We have to have the appropriate device. Low-income households often have a mobile phone, and we're like, oh, they're connected. What all can you do on that mobile phone? Can you create a resume on your mobile phone? Maybe if you're under 14. I can't. I need that screen to be a little bigger these days. Digital skills. Everyone needs digital skills, and we need these digital skills to be evolving nonstop. I'm often the downer in these conversations because I'm like, you know what? This issue's never going away. Technology is going to keep changing. I don't think we're solving inequity anytime soon. Because of those two facts, we will be forever addressing the digital divide. We will never actually solve the digital divide. Shit. Nobody likes to hear that. There's a bunch of dollar signs behind that statement. Nobody wants extra costs for anything, right? But this is our reality, and we have to address it long term. Tech support. Those devices just cause all of us so many issues that we have to figure out how everybody has access to the tech support they needed. And applications, of course. Applications that meet the needs of regular folks. NDIA, National Digital Inclusion Alliance. This is the organization I founded about 9 years ago. So our vision is that everyone has the opportunity to use technology to live, learn, work, and thrive. Because it's essential today. It's no longer a nice to have. Like, oh gee, maybe I'll decide to get the internet next month. Doesn't work like that. You have to have it. And individuals who don't have it have proxies. You all may be some of those proxies. Do you help somebody else do something online because they have to do that thing online and they don't want to or they can't? That's our reality. I also bring that negativity into a conversation. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you, you don't have a choice anymore. Sometimes curse words come out when I say that. So we think about this journey, this path for all of these different solutions, and we have to have all of them. We need the holistic solution. If we only provide that access to the internet, that availability, as Nicole showed you, availability and digital and the digital skills, the broadband adoption, if we only have those things, if we only have the availability, it's insufficient. It may be there, but if folks aren't subscribing to it, what does it matter? So we have to make sure that we are addressing their ability to subscribe to that broadband service and their ability to use it, both of them. And then throw in the devices, this is feeling like a really heavy problem. So what NDIA does, we're a 501c3, our resources are freely available, I welcome you to them. We hear what folks on the ground are doing. Our friends at the Toledo-Lucas County Public Library are doing a smash-up job of the regional coalition there. We bring folks like that together, help them learn from each other at that national level, just as you all learn from each other at the local level, just as you're learning from each other here, and we'll continue to learn with each other when you step over into the Broadband Ohio event. Hurrah to Broadband Ohio for having an event like that, for doing that. Not all states do that. Y'all are very fortunate to have who you have at the broadband office here. So NDIA pulls folks together who are doing this work. We learn from them, we help them talk to each other, peer-to-peer kind of learning. That's always the way to do things. But then also we take that information, we go to the feds and we say, here's what we heard locally. And surprisingly enough, they actually wanted to listen. I was kind of blown away by that. During the pandemic, there were photos in newspapers of how kids were doing their homework in parking lots. I had never been so popular as I was during the pandemic. I've been doing this work for a lot of years, right? And nobody really ever cared before. And all of a sudden, they're like, can I talk about the digital divide? Yes, please, I would love to talk about the digital divide. Such that the federal government decided they were going to put $42.5 billion into getting broadband into rural areas. Oh my gosh. $2.75 billion into digital equity. Oh my gosh. I had worked on that bill, but didn't actually think it was going to go anywhere. Don't tell anyone. And it did. The federal government was like, you know what? We actually need to address this. Because seeing those kids doing their homework in parking lots hit everybody like right here. You know what's about to happen? Those kids are gonna start doing their homework in parking lots again because the Affordable Connectivity Program is about to end at the end of April because Congress can't get its act together. It's a bipartisan support. Everybody's like, yes, this is a great idea. But we're not sure how to do it. I'm not sure where to find the money. Whew, talk about depressing. But we do have that $2.75 billion for digital equity, and that money's still on its way. Every state now has a digital equity plan. Wow. Sometimes we call it a digital opportunity plan like we do here in Ohio. Same idea. So here's that money. It's flowing through the US Department of Commerce. Some of it's going through the states. Every state creates a digital equity plan. And then states like Ohio are going to get what they call capacity awards. This is to implement the plan. Wowzers. Not only are we creating a plan, it's not just going to sit on a shelf. We're actually going to make this stuff happen. That's incredible. And then a separate pot of money will be federally competitive. I will tell you a secret to getting access to that federal competitive money is you got to go in with friends. They're not going to write small checks. This is a big program they have to manage. This is billions of dollars. They need you to go in with friends as coalitions. That's why those coalitions, one of those reasons those coalitions are so important. Make friends. Go in for that federal money with a coalition. So whose job is this anyhow? Solving the digital divide. Friends, it's all of us. It's all of you. It's me. We all have to be at the table to get this done. Sometimes I'll hear folks say, library's got it. No worries. Okay, that is not true. Plus, they hate that unfunded mandate business. We really, all of us have to figure this out, and we're always going to have to figure it out. This is not a short-term problem. We have over 1,600 organizations now part of NDIA. When we first got started, I think I had gathered together about 30 of us. That's incredible. We're in all 50 states, most of the territories. This is progress, right? This is movement building stuff here. We have lots of resources. I welcome you to those resources. Because if we don't share how to do this, it's going to be a long road, friends. Want to draw attention in particular to our trailblazers. These are local governments. Local governments that are in the room, I welcome you to these resources. This current year, we identified 47 local governments who are digital inclusion trailblazers around the country. These are local governments who are figuring out how to address the digital divide in their communities. Doing this resulted in us coming up with 134 local program examples, 50 model policies, 24 digital equity plans. There's job descriptions on there. Use it, replicate it, do a little copy paste, because otherwise it's going to take us a long time to get to this. That $2.75 billion will not solve the digital divide. I know that's hard to swallow. It's a lot of money. But here's what it can do. It can help us create really strong ecosystems. Ecosystems where folks are talking to each other. Somebody's providing devices, whether they're refurbished or new. There's solutions for that. You know who to go to. Different entities are providing digital skills training programs for different populations in different geographies. They're talking to each other. They know how this works. There's a low-cost broadband offer. If we don't have a subsidy, then there are low-cost offers by all the providers in that area. That's a goal to set. Because without that broadband subsidy, we need those voluntary low-cost offers. It's one of the resources on NDIA's website where we list all of those. So what we can do with this money is go after sustainability. We have this incredibly unique opportunity where the federal government is putting in all of this money. Our goal, robust digital inclusion ecosystems, and we figure out sustainability of them. The first piece of that is awareness. What we can do during this time is starting right here. Actually, it's already started. This is like step 42 or whatever, where we're all talking about this issue. And then we got to keep talking about this issue. And the more that we do it inside those coalitions, the stronger that message is. Because then we're using the same terminology. We're using broadband adoption. We're using digital inclusion. We're using digital equity. We're using digital opportunity. We know what those terms mean. And when we all keep using them, it elevates it publicly with the media and with potential funders. right? Because the funding issue is one we are going to have to constantly solve. And it will not just come from the federal government. It will also be philanthropy, corporations. I got a whole list of folks who should be paying in because it benefits them. That data that will have the resources to gather, that data will help us show who benefits. It's not just the individuals receiving the services who benefit, our communities benefit, that's for sure. Corporations benefit, and it's not just the internet service providers who benefit. Yes, they get more subscribers, and all of the large digital internet service providers are now providing grant funds to help folks get connected because they realize the marketing that's being done to help those folks participate in having that internet service. But it's not just them. Who else benefits? Retail, e-commerce, healthcare, because you can participate in telehealth. You can look things up. You can talk to your doctor. Finance, you can do your banking online. Lots and lots of folks benefit. Some of them have figured this out and are supporting digital inclusion programs in their communities. But what this unique opportunity is in front of us is to gather data to help them understand how it benefits. That's the unique opportunity in front of us. Wanda and her folks, there were often times when she could not pay her staff. That's been the history of digital inclusion in the United States. Being unable to pay staff. They would then become volunteers and go on unemployment. That's a part of how Wanda survived for 25 years. That cannot be our future because digital inclusion programs will go under with those circumstances. We have to figure out the financial sustainability, and that financial sustainability is rooted in data. We also need to layer it into programs. Workforce programs, health programs, education programs. The more it's layered in to existing programs, then those programs recognize the benefit to their other mission. Say their mission is housing, and they've managed to get some computer labs in, they've gotten connectivity into folks' own apartments, they're figuring out how to teach digital skills, just as Vistula Management was doing 30 years ago. And then they see, oh my gosh, we're seeing the benefits to those that we serve, and it's easier for us to serve these folks. They're now paying us online. We don't have to have as much staffing in the office. When folks who benefit see the impact on their own programs, that's when they invest. So we need to layer it in. And then advocacy. We have to keep educating everyone, policymakers, the media, corporations, those who benefit. That advocacy will never stop. We've essentially built a movement, thanks to the pandemic, around this issue. And we cannot go back. We cannot go back to kids doing their homework in parking lots. I welcome you to join NDIA. It's free. Not if you're a corporation. We actually make you pay. Nonprofits and government, it's free for you. But the community is really important in terms of lifting each other up and answering questions. You have a question? Ask the community. The community nationally will respond. So I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much. And I think I have time for a few questions. I should have given you all a heads up that I'd probably have time for a few questions. Sorry about that. Well, I'm going to hang around all day. If anyone wants to talk about this, clearly I could go on and on forever. So happy to keep the conversation flowing. If you want any examples of things that are happening nationally, come ask, right? I'll point you to who's doing what, and you can go talk to those folks and I'll connect you. So big thanks to Nicole for having me here.
right, well, we have a scheduled break, so we have a little extra time, so feel free to, again, get yourself some food, get some refreshments. Please go out in the lobby and see our sponsor tables out there, and we will reconvene in 15. Thank you. Going to get started in a minute here, so. Sorry. If everyone wants to head to their seats, we're going to get started in just another minute. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Morning. Hope you enjoyed that short video. My name is Jason Kutchma. I'm the Executive Director of the National Medal Award-winning Toledo Lucas County Public Library. Members of my leadership team over here probably just rolled their eyes because I'm not allowed to get in front of a group of people without mentioning that we won the nation's highest honor for library services. So yes, thank you. I wasn't fishing, but thank you. I wanted to thank Dr. Pfeiffer and the CRD team for the theme of this year's conference and all the work that we've done together with them to assess our region's connectivity. You know, a lot of people have fond memories of their childhood library, either as a refuge for a bookworm or a familiar place for, where you see familiar faces, or that maybe that nostalgia is rooted in, more recently, in parents taking their children to the public library or grandparents taking their grandchildren. But few people really think about the public library as an economic driver, as a place where so many people level up as information is gleaned, or as new skills are learned, or as community connections are made, or as access to technology is gained. And speaking of technology, advancements in consumer technology really brought a digital revolution into people's homes in the 1980s. But it would be another decade or more before the cost of personal computers, CD players, and the like became something that was more accessible for most Americans. And in fact, in 1986, the Toledo Lucas County Public Library opened one of the country's first microcomputer laboratories in the nation. And by the mid-1990s, we were offering reliable access to that little thing called the internet. And a lot of us, maybe who aren't connected to the university at a time, were using the public library to explore this newfangled thing called the internet. That would obviously forever change the way we live our lives. As a place where access to the internet and technology skills and the skills that are needed to wield the internet's power, the public library is really a natural leader, I think, in helping our community understand the importance of being connected. And so it really made sense for the library to take a lead role in convening conversations in our community around broadband access in our community, starting back in August of 2021, after we saw in stark relief during the pandemic how many families and students were really disconnected in our community. So what began as conversations about digital inclusion among concerned community members eventually grew into the Greater Toledo Digital Inclusion Alliance with more than 50 individuals and organizations represented throughout the region. The work of that alliance led the Toledo Lucas County Public Library to be named the lead on the Regional Digital Inclusion Alliance for Broadband Ohio, representing 22 counties throughout Northwest Ohio we as a state work together on that digital equity plan. But I'm gonna leave all the details that good work the library has done with Broadband Ohio to our next speakers. I'd like to introduce the Director of Government Relations and Advocacy and fellow BGSU alum, Lucas Camuso-Stahl, and Broadband Ohio's Manager of Digital Equity and Inclusion, Anna Miller, to the stage.
All right. Clicker. I'm assuming. Okay. Hello, good morning. So it's Monday, daylight savings. We both had a lot of coffee, so please excuse us and be gracious because we'll probably be a little awkward. But thank you all for being here this morning. Thanks to CRD for being an absolutely amazing partner to the Toledo Lucas County Public Library and the digital equity work that we've been doing here in Lucas County as well as Northwest Ohio. Originally, Lisa Lawson and Dr. Pfeiffer asked me to speak about our regional work, but really I said, I cannot come on this stage alone without bringing in Anna Miller from Broadband Ohio, who has been an absolutely amazing resource to us in doing our Regional Digital Inclusion Alliance work, which is just an eloquent way of me saying I didn't want to be up here alone. So thank you, Anna, for coming up with me. But I know we wanted to kick off this conversation talking a little bit about coalition work. We've heard a lot, even from Angela about the importance of local digital equity coalitions or local digital inclusion coalitions. So I wanted to start the conversation off with that.
Sure. So to start the conversation around coalitions, I'll actually go start talking a little bit about the funding that we received from the federal government. So in October of last year, Broadband Ohio got just over $1 million as part of the Digital Equity Act. You heard Angela kind of go through some of those funds, but we received over $1 million. I came on board, new to my role, new to everything, with all of this funding. And so thinking about, hey, where do we start? How do we really do this to develop a digital equity plan? And thankfully, we are here in Ohio where there were so many groups already doing this work and who have been doing this work for decades. So that made my job a lot easier. And it also really helped with this planning process. So we really relied at the state on our local and regional organizations, coalitions, all sorts of groups that were already doing this work. So you saw Wanda Davis on the screen earlier in Northeast Ohio, her organization, the Ashbury Senior Computer Community Center, a great resource in Northeast Ohio. Here we have the Greater Toledo Digital Equity Coalition up in Lucas County. We have folks in Defiance, folks around here doing great work with digital navigators. So those were really, really crucial in this planning process. So as we work, we really just wanted to leverage the relationships that these folks already had on the ground at the state level. It's hard to get to every county, every community to hear stories, to really get what's happening, the pulse of what's happening across Ohio without these organizations and without those connections to these regional coalitions, local coalitions, all of that great work. So from you guys at the library to all of the nonprofits that we were able to work with, the things that you've been doing for decades have really been crucial to help me at the state and to help build our digital equity planning process. So I'm going to kick it back to you to talk about Greater Toledo.
Yeah, thank you. So as you all heard from Jason, I will also humbly brag about our national medal winning library systems at the Toledo Lucas County Public Library. We've been doing digital inclusion work for decades now, even before we coined terms like the digital divide or things of that nature. Public libraries have really been striving to do their best to make sure that Cutting edge technology is available to community members as well as engaging with technology, whether that be computer classes, courses, or maker spaces, all the way to offering high-speed internet, high-speed Wi-Fi in our locations as well to our community members. But we are very fortunate here in the state of Ohio that story isn't just exclusive to our public library system. We have nearly 500 public library branches across the state of Ohio. Our state is very rich in public library systems. We enjoy the support from local voters to help us make our services possible, as well as support at the state level as well from our state legislators. So again, we're able to do these long decades worth of work because of this really wonderful support, and this has been a key component to library services here in the state of Ohio for decades now. So as was mentioned earlier by Angela, really the pandemic was kind of that breaking point for a lot of us, really seeing what digital inequity looked like in our communities right in front of our faces, more than we've ever seen it before. So again, at public libraries, we've always seen people come into our spaces to utilize digital services or digital tools, but we were one of those many entities in the communities where we saw kids in our parking lots using the Wi-Fi to do homework. We saw parents, now trying to utilize new devices, laptops, get on Zoom because their workplace had gone remote. So a lot of people trying to very quickly get into the technology fold and start to use technology in a new way that they've never used it before or thought they had to use it. So again, this was really a dramatic shift and a dramatic change for our community as we, again, we're trying to collectively navigate, what was going on, what was happening in the pandemic, what's the future of work look like, what's the future of school looks like. So in those early days, in kind of the summer of 2021, we had a small group of community members come together. We had federal officials, state officials, we had members of our city governments, our county governments, representation from our local unions as well, all came together, and again, we were all seeing these similar stories through our communities. People sitting in parking lots trying to use Wi-Fi. A lot of organizations in our community were giving away tablets and laptops because they were getting so many families and so many adults coming to them saying, I need to keep working, but I don't have a laptop. My desktop at work was the only thing that I had to utilize, a piece of technology that I had to utilize, so I need help, I need assistance. So we're seeing all these stories, we're seeing all these things happening, and then all of a sudden we start to catch word about the federal government putting together the Infrastructure and Jobs Act. And within that, we saw over $60 billion allocated to both broadband development as well as some digital equity dollars as well. So our community, again, got together and said, wait a second, there's a lot of money rolling down from the federal government. We know this is a huge issue in our community, a huge issue in Lucas County. If we get that money, or if money starts to be invested in our local communities, do we actually know what the problem looks like, and can we quantify that problem here in our community? So CUE, BGSU, CRD, we reached out to them and those few community groups, the library reached out and asked if they could help us to quantify that issue and what the digital divide actually looked like in Lucas County. So we started out, actually, if you want to progress to the next slide. So we, again, contracted with BGSU CRD, asked them if they could begin working with our coalition, our Greater Toledo Digital Equity Coalition, which today has grown into over 40 members. We really have tried to bring in as many individuals as we could into the fold. Healthcare partners, nonprofits, businesses all sit at this big table. And again, in 2021, 2022, we really wanted to quantify the issue of what digital disconnectivity looked like in our community. So BGSU CRD put together this plan for us, where we kind of took this step-by-step process of how we're actually going to measure disconnectivity in our community. So we started out with a community scan and an asset inventory, really looking at where digital resources exist in our community, who is doing what. Again, just to get a better understanding of what's actually going on and what resources are being invested in. We also did an institutional needs assessment as well as a community needs assessment. So the institutional needs assessment was actually a survey that we sent out to, again, businesses, nonprofits, healthcare partners, to ask them what their expectation was when they are working with their clients or their customers to use technology. So again, as you heard earlier, healthcare was, a really interesting partner to talk to. Again, as we worked through the pandemic and talked about that transition to telehealth, more individuals now, utilizing Zoom, online portals for their healthcare appointments. So we wanted to talk to more institutional partners, again, to ask them, what are your expectations for customers? What are your expectations for clients in using technology? And how would you like them to utilize technology? But then we also went to a community needs assessment. So that is where we actually went out into the community and asked community members directly what connection at their home looks like, how they utilize technology, what are some of those resources that they are lacking within their home. Because again, the institutional really helped us understand expectations, but then the community assessment helped us understand the reality of that and where that gap was in between. So we had about 113 institutional responses to our survey, and we had 656 community members engage in our community needs assessment as well, which is a really fantastic sample size for Lucas County. So we were incredibly pleased to get that much feedback from the community, again, around, do you have internet connection at home? What does your internet connection look like? Do you have a device at home? And as we further really started to dig into the data more, and again, with the help of BGSU CRD and through leveraging some census data, we saw that a little over 20,000 households in our community, in Lucas County specifically, do not have an internet connection right now, so they're not currently paying for an internet subscription. And again, you can dig into those details more of why that is. Is it an affordability issue? Do they not have a provider that's readily accessible to them? So there are many layers to that question. But again, we received really wonderful insight from our community members and our institutional folks of what connectivity looks like. And as we dug even further, we saw that nearly 30,000 households in Lucas County also do not have an internet-ready device. So they do not have a smart device within their household, whether that be a smartphone, a laptop, a tablet, a desktop, what have you. So really to think about, nearly 30,000 households in Lucas County, trying to imagine navigating your life in 2024 without a device, seems impossible. How do you go about your day without key technology like a smartphone or like a tablet or a laptop? But so many of our community members are doing that every single day. And again, being a public library, we see that in our spaces all the time. People come and utilize our technology because they don't have it at home. And most of the time it's because it's an affordability issue or it's a digital skills issue. So they know they need to use it, but they just don't know how. And they're afraid to start that conversation. So after we went through those two assessments and some of that really interesting and insightful data that we got back, our coalition started to develop goals around what we can collectively do as a community organization to address some of those problems and some of those issues that the data is showing us. So we developed those goals. I'm very happy to say that we've achieved a lot of those goals. And some of those key goals relate to ACP, so the Affordable Connectivity Program. And I'll also do my own call to action around ACP. We have bipartisan support on this piece of legislation that can keep 40,000 households in Lucas County connected to the internet. Again, 40,000 households in Lucas County alone are utilizing the ACP benefit. And I also want to verbally underline households. This, there could be 2 individuals in a household, there could be 6 individuals in a household. So this is a really key and critical program that's keeping so many of our community members connected to the internet. The internet is as essential as water, electricity, and modern living. So it's really important for us to continue to collectively advocate to our legislators to fund, again, the ACP. So I'll step off of that soapbox for a quick second. And I probably droned on too long about our Greater Toledo Digital Equity Coalition, so thank you all for bearing with me. But with that, our coalition work, it really gained attention from our friends down at Broadband Ohio in Columbus, which is why you all then reached out to us about engaging in this, at the time, new thing called a Regional Digital Inclusion Alliance Lead. So do you want to talk a little bit more about RDIAs, who they are, and I guess kind of the thought behind why Broadband Ohio wanted to establish these leads?
I will join Lucas on his little soapbox for a moment on the ACP. There are over 1 million Ohioans that were utilizing the ACP benefit across the state. So 40,000 in Lucas County, huge. 1 million Ohioans across the state is even bigger. Ohio has the second highest enrollment rate in the country, so that's a lot of Ohioans that could potentially lose that opportunity to access internet. And so now I will step down.
Perfect. We've both done our call to action for this morning. Great.
And talk about the RDIAs. So again, we received a whole lot of funding from the federal government to help develop a digital equity, or here in Ohio, our digital opportunity plan, knowing that folks like Lucas and the Toledo Lucas County Library had done such thoughtful work around the issue of the digital divide. We knew we couldn't do something so in-depth in the 12 months that the federal government had given us an opportunity to put together this plan. So we put out a call for organizations around the state who might be interested in engaging in any sort of digital inclusion work with the state. So we put out this call for folks that might want to lead a group of folks in their region, folks that would just maybe want to participate, and other folks who just didn't really know what they wanted, but just knew that this was an issue in their community. We received over 100 responses, which was pretty both exciting that enough people were interested in this work, a little bit depressing knowing that this was an issue in a lot of the state across a lot of communities. So for folks that were interested, for organizations mostly that were interested in leading some of this work, we did a competitive process, interviews, asking folks a lot of questions, asking a lot of questions about the Toledo work for you all up here. But we divided the state into these 5 regions that you can see on the screen. So we have Northwest Ohio, Northeast Ohio, Southeast Ohio, Central, and Southwest. Trying to pick a map that wasn't too controversial was kind of our first step here. So we landed on this. We, again, reached out to a lot of those organizations that were interested in leading, had interviews, asked them a lot of questions about their commitment to kind of expanding their work from a county or even just city level to a full region, which in this region is about 22 counties, which is a whole lot bigger than one. So we knew that we were really asking for a lot and wanted folks that were super committed. So we landed on 5 organizations around the state to help lead this work. So for the digital equity planning process, that really meant leveraging their existing relationships and building a lot of new relationships around the state to help with listening sessions and a lot of stakeholder engagement work. So we had each of these lead organizations. So for Northwest Ohio, that was the Toledo Lucas County Public Library. So we had them lead listening sessions, both in person. Some regions had virtual listening sessions. Some folks had pop-up events at existing events in their region to engage folks, one-on-one interviews with organizations that are also doing this work in the region. So we had them do a bulk of our stakeholder engagement for the plan. And so we got a lot of engagement through that. We were able to, at the state, attend many of those sessions. They were great. We got folks who were concerned residents that would come out. We got internet service providers. We got a whole range of folks who attended those and helped give us really, really awesome feedback in a way that Broadband Ohio would not have been able to do had we gone out on our own trying to get folks to the table. It's these local entities that have connections to local media. We had newspapers that would drive folks to our listening sessions. So those were things that we definitely could not have done alone. And so we've had them helping with this process over the past year. And then we really want to continue this work moving forward. Obviously, closing the digital divide will continue to be an issue. There's no closing the digital divide as new technology and new opportunities kind of arise. So we are going to continue leveraging these regional organizations as we do apply for that next round of funding from the federal government, to continue this work, to continue helping us to solve a lot of these digital concerns around the adoption side. So we saw Dr. Pfeiffer had a slide up there. We kind of divide broadband issues, connectivity, into two categories, where it's that availability, which is mostly infrastructure related, and adoption. And so the work that we are having folks do with these regional digital inclusion alliances is really centered around adoption. So again, we heard Angela mention, it's great going after you, Angela, because you cover so much. But we have these folks really focused on devices and technical support, affordability, and all of that. So that has been really an exciting process, and we're hoping that that really helps for sustainability as well. Another big chunk of the work we had our regional digital inclusion alliances do was collect some data for us. So I will throw this back to you, Lucas. Tell us a little bit about that process.
Yeah, a lot of data collection, and as you can see from these regional footprints, a lot of driving as well. I saw many parts of Northwest Ohio that I had not been to. So it's a 22 county footprint, as you can see. So a really large regional footprint that we were kind of put in charge of to go out, go into the communities there and ask them about connectivity. So again, what does your internet connection look like? How are you connecting to the internet? What devices are you utilizing within your home? And we did that through our listening sessions. So Broadband Ohio very graciously helped fund us to be able to go out and do those sessions, as they did for all the regional leads. And we conducted 9 listening sessions across Northwest Ohio. So we had sessions that were broken into government entities and elected officials came to one of our sessions, businesses and economic development directors, community groups, nonprofits, and then general community members who wanted to talk about, again, what connectivity looked like within their community, their village, or where they lived at. So this particular region was really interesting, I will say, in comparison to the other regions here in the state of Ohio. So as you saw from the connectivity map that Dr. Pfeiffer pulled up, again, and going from the southwest corner to the northeast corner, you kind of have that connectivity band that goes across the state, where you see a pretty solid connection, again, amongst the three C's, as we always refer to here in Toledo, the 3 C's, because again, there's a lot of suburban sprawl, a lot of urban sprawl that again kind of spans across the state from corner to corner. But you really see a lot of red and disconnectivity in those 2 opposing corners as well. So southeast Ohio, which, as we know, Appalachia, Ohio, really hard to actually dig connections out to people's homes, but as well as Northwest Ohio, because we're dealing, yes, we're flat here, but we are dealing with a lot of farmland, a lot of ag, and quite literally people who just live really far from one another, right? Like just communities that just live a great deal in great distance from one another. One of the other things that was really interesting about the Northwest Ohio region was that when you look at the kind of top 10 agriculturally based communities, so the top 10 most rural counties, agriculturally based counties in the state of Ohio, 8 of those 10 are here in Northwest Ohio. So when having those listening sessions, it was really interesting gaining feedback from community members around, again, where they lacked connectivity, but really what they wish they could do with connectivity. So we had a lot of conversations with folks around agriculture, a lot of individuals saying that they wish they could take their agricultural business or their farm online, but they simply can't. The connection just isn't strong enough for them to be able to do that. And we heard from community members, individuals who are parents around, again, school was still remote somewhat, or some of them had kids coming back from college and trying to connect to the internet while at home and just simply couldn't do that. So the number of stories I heard from community members about putting satellites on top of their grain bins to try and get a stronger internet connection. I mean, we have really innovative folks here in Northwest Ohio, and people will do anything or possibly climb anywhere, I guess, to get stronger internet connection to their home, which was, again, a really interesting point of feedback. But we also heard some interesting input from economic development directors and economic development managers in counties as well. I will echo Anna, Angela really and Dr. Pfeiffer gave us so much good information to kind of help set the table for this. But as we talk about, remote work, people being able to kind of live anywhere to do their jobs, a lot of rural economic development managers said we could do so much of a better job of getting people to come and live in our communities or trying to market to people to come and live in our rural community because the cost of living is low. You can buy a home with a nice little chunk of property, right, and not have your neighbors right up next against you. And the quality of life just in these rural communities and some of these small villages and towns is really fantastic. And you're able to build a really strong sense of community with your fellow neighbors and your community members. But if you don't have reliable internet connection and you're asking people to move to your community to do their remote job, it's essentially a non-starter. And it's the same thing for economic development as well. We heard from a lot of elected officials and, again, a lot of economic development managers around trying to attract businesses to come and, establish their factory or manufacturing plant in their community, but simply saying, no, we can't because we don't have strong enough internet connection in our community. We also heard really interesting feedback from rural healthcare partners, rural hospitals as well. We had one individual from a hospital come and say that oftentimes their internet is disconnecting and dropping out when they're trying to email, MRI scans to the next hospital over or to a specialist. So again, really interesting stories that we were hearing from our community members that we were able to jot down, get all of that feedback and send it back to Broadband Ohio. But in addition to that, in the direct community listening sessions, and Anna, you mentioned the survey as well. We also did a survey in Northwest Ohio to really get more feedback from community members around what their internet connection looked like. And it was really interesting because about 47% of our survey respondents said that they had somewhat difficult paying for their internet bill. So not only were they struggling to get it, but in cases where they did get it, they were really struggling to be able to continue to pay for that subscription price. And also we saw a lot and heard a lot from our community members around digital skill building and how that was an ongoing issue. Again, as we try and build up our workforces in rural communities and even urban communities, a lot of what we're doing in our day-to-day jobs, whether you work in an office or whether you work in a manufacturing plant, you're having to work on a computer, you're having to type, you need to interface with technology. So a lot of individuals were telling us the digital skill building is a really huge hurdle in our community, and we're really looking for more resources to be able to do digital skill building, which was fantastic because we had all of our listening sessions in public libraries, and many individuals said, and the public library here in our community is that one singular entry point for our community to be able to build their digital skills. So they're able to come in, take a computer class, learn a new skill, learn how to operate Excel. And within our survey, we also saw that most of our community members who participated in the survey in Northwest Ohio said that they utilize internet or devices at their home, at work, at school, and at their public library. So these are kind of those key community institutions, key anchor institutions that folks here in Northwest Ohio were utilizing, again, to use a piece of technology or to connect to the internet. So I know we've been chatting a lot about RDIA work, but I'm really curious to hear from you, Anna. We talk about DE work moving forward. Money is starting to roll down kind of in a second wave from the federal government. So this is a time where you all are really looking to local communities around where investment is needed and where essentially the state should be, what they should be funding and where they should be funding. So can you talk a little bit about the future of DE work right now in the state of Ohio?
Yes. So again, as Angela mentioned, you can't really solve the digital divide. There will kind of always continue to be issues as new technology comes about. We expect to hopefully have the opportunity to apply for digital equity capacity grant funds in the coming months, which will be a several-year grant program that'll help support digital inclusion programs around the state. So what we really, really need folks to do is connect with your local digital equity coalition, with your regional digital inclusion alliance. We're going to be relying heavily on you folks to help guide organizations and help kind of organize the region and get that ecosystem going, that digital equity ecosystem going. So we don't have kind of this like chaos happening around the state. We're looking towards the RDIA leads to really help folks apply. Sometimes applying to state or federal grants gets very scary and hard. So we'd like you all to provide that technical assistance and support, and we'd like organizations to just be in contact with Lucas in this region. If folks are not from this region, I can connect you to the other regional digital inclusion alliance leads. We just want to make sure that we're keeping track of every organization doing this work so that when it is time to get those state funds or to apply for federal funds, that everyone is getting that money and we can really help to make a difference. Beyond those funds, we really are looking towards sustainability. How do we keep this work going beyond a 5, 6, 7-year grant award period? So we are looking to organizations like healthcare, like the financial industry. There are a lot of folks that really rely on digital inclusion work, on having folks who have digital skills, who have devices, who are able to do a lot of this work and don't necessarily realize that that's what they're relying on, aren't really familiar with the digital divide and all of the work happening in the state. So we really want to make sure that there's a sustainable plan moving forward. And in doing that, contact your local regional digital inclusion alliance or reach out to us directly at the state and we can put you in contact with folks. Yeah.
So again, you all are here this morning, so you know who your regional lead is.
Yeah.
It's me. Hi. Would love to connect with you and get you involved in some of our digital equity work that we're doing. But I also just want to again put another point on Anna's point around connecting with your regional lead, but also local coalitions as well. We talk all the time that we want Columbus, our state house, to be investing more in Northwest Ohio, and we have an entity in Columbus that is wanting to do just that. They are getting money, they want to invest it in local communities, they want to hear from local communities to know where and how to make those investments. So Broadband Ohio also has a lot of great programs. Your Accelerator program, which is a really wonderful way. I've seen many of you who either were at RDIA listening sessions or some of you who I saw on Zoom for the Accelerator programs. Really lovely program to be able to even kind of start to help you build the foundations for a coalition, which is really important. Again, we're a region, so these are really big goals, really big strategies, big feedback that we're receiving from 22 counties. But I would also encourage you all that if you're interested in this work, to look at or connect with the folks who are doing coalition-based work within specifically your county. And if you don't have that, think about ways that you can bring people together to start that coalition-based work, because We need to leverage investments from Columbus. We need to leverage investments from the state, and we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to bring dollars here to our local communities. So again, if you haven't started a local coalition in your county, think about who the partners are that you need to do that. But if you haven't been part of our RDIA efforts yet, please feel free to connect with me.
And if you haven't registered already, I think it's maybe closed, but we'll invite you anyway to the session following lunch today. Broadband Ohio is convening folks. There was an open invitation to come join us this afternoon to learn more about some of these programs, and we'll be talking about the Accelerator program. We'll have an organization. We have an organization that we funded, Mercy Health Toledo, speaking about some of the work that they did around digital inclusion. So that is a great opportunity to come learn a little bit more about what's going on at the state. And I know that we are over time.
We are. We just had so much good information to share. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it.
We need connectivity. Everybody needs it. It's a necessity anymore. It's not just an option. To me, it's a historic day. It's a day that we've waited for a lot of years.
On one hand, it's the conclusion of a massive project. And on the other hand, it's just the beginning. It's the beginning of new connectivity for farmers in the county who are exploring new uses of technology on their farms. It's the beginning of a new era of connectivity for school kids and teachers and parents. It's a new era of connectivity for people who want to be able to improve their health care at home or just enjoy entertainment.
Our grandkids will have the opportunities here that they wouldn't have otherwise. And I think it puts us all on a level playing field with our city friends, and that's critical. We collect a lot of data on our farm. And so it's the collection of that, but you also have to be able to analyze it, break it down, and that takes bandwidth to do some of it.
What we learned from the project is that the public and private sectors can partner together to close the digital divide, to solve that connectivity gap. It's just a matter of finding the right partners to help get that objective achieved.
Hello, everyone. My name's Mark Romito, and I'm the Director of External Affairs for AT&T. And I have the pleasure of introducing our next presenter, who will talk about digital inclusion and telehealth. And that person is Danielle Renkley. She joined the Indiana Rural Health Association in 2022 as a program coordinator for the Upper Midwest Telehealth Resource Center. She also serves as the host of the Resource Center's podcast, A Virtual View. Prior to joining the Health Association, Danielle was part of the Division of Emergency Preparedness at the Indiana Department of Health. While there, she served as a part of the department's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. I bet that was a very good time, good times back then during the pandemic. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Sociology with a focus on statistics and inequality from Ball State University. Danielle resides in Hamilton County, Indiana, and she enjoys kayaking and hiking with her dog, Magnus. Please welcome Danielle Renke.
Thank you for the dog mention, that was important. Well, I'm so excited to be here today to talk to all of you folks about one of my favorite topics in the whole world, telehealth. And is this my clicker? Thanks, guys. All right, so today we're going to spend some time talking about the web of telehealth. And I'm sorry, I'm a wanderer, so I'll try not to get too far from the mic. So here are my disclaimers. I am part of a grant-funded program, so, So, as was mentioned in my introduction, in 2020, I was working at the Indiana State Department of Health in the Emergency Preparedness Division. And I have a very distinct memory of telling a colleague that this whole NCOV-19 thing would be done in about 8 weeks. And so about 8 weeks after I had said that, I was working in our COVID-19 emergency call center, so my prediction was just a little bit off. But the reason I remember that so clearly is because I had gotten a call from a young mother, a young single mother in a rural area who was talking about how she had been unable to make it to a specialist appointment for her autistic son because transportation had been shut down. And she asked me if I had any recommendations for what she should do next. And at that time, I really did not. But today, I would have told her, invest in telehealth. That's a way you can become connected with services, even if you aren't necessarily there in person. So when we think about telehealth, a lot of people have a tendency to simplify it in a way, to think it's just like one thing. It's sitting down and going to the doctor on your computer, as my 80-year-old grandmother says. But the reality is much more complicated. There is more that goes into telehealth. There's more options, more opportunities. And we're going to spend some time today talking about those opportunities. So we're going to spend some time talking about my organization, the UMTRC, and why you should listen to me. And then we're going to talk a little bit about telehealth in rural communities, and then we'll finish up with a brief mention of telehealth and broadband. So the Upper Midwest Telehealth Resource Center, that's where I'm from. So I reside in Indiana, but my organization, the UMTRC, does cover Indiana, Ohio, Illinois, and Michigan. And don't tell the other states, but Ohio is my favorite. So we are part of a consortium of 13 other, telehealth resource centers throughout the United States. 12 of those are regional, 2 are national. And we do cover the whole US, so wherever you're located, as well as the territories, wherever you're located, you do have a TRC covering you. So here is sort of a big map of all the different TRCs, as you can see, where that lovely light purple up there. And then we have our 2 national TRCs, the TTAC, which is our Technology Center, and CCHP, which is our Connected Health Policy Center. And what's nice about being part of this consortium, it has been around for more than a decade now. We do predate COVID, as it seems few things related to telehealth do these days. But we have a lot of expertise between all of our different states and all of our different stakeholders. So if folks have a question about telehealth and I can't answer it, I know someone who can. So what do we do at the UMTRC and the other telehealth resource centers? So our bread and butter and what our grant program was really founded to do was to provide technical assistance to folks. And that can be anything from somebody asking, how do I start a telehealth program? I have no idea. Or somebody asking a very specific billing question, like how do we use this CPT code in this specific circumstance? So it goes from the very general to the very specific. And then we also provide virtual office hours, so if folks want to come and just ask us questions. Oh, and I will say that this isn't limited to just providers, just patients. We talk to folks who have questions just from an academic sense. We talk to CEOs of hospital systems. It really runs the gamut. We also provide a lot of educational resources. We do webinars monthly, we have podcasts, and we publish new resources pretty regularly. A couple of those latest resources include our reimbursement guides. We have those state by state, really explaining what different insurers cover. And then we also have telehealth toolkits focusing on different aspects of telehealth. My favorite is our remote patient monitoring one because I wrote that one. And then, like I said, we do pretty frequent webinars. So now that you understand why you should listen to me about telehealth, we're going to talk about the importance of rural telehealth. So what needs to be understood here is that when I'm talking about rural telehealth, even the staunchest telehealth advocates are not saying we need to get rid of traditional medicine entirely and replace everything with telehealth. It's not a panacea. It can't fix everything, but it can be a fantastic tool for getting folks in rural areas connected if they aren't able to connect on their own with traditional in-person care. So folks in rural areas, as well as folks in urban and suburban areas, but we're going to focus on rural because we see the most disparity there. They face a variety of different types of barriers, things from attitudinal barriers related to mental health treatment and substance use disorder treatment, to communication barriers, folks who aren't comfortable using technology. And then you have our policy and programmatic barriers, which are pretty self-explanatory. And then we have things like the physical reality of I can't drive to a doctor's appointment, so I'm unable to receive care. So let's talk about rural barriers in specific. So provider shortages aren't something that are unique to rural areas, but like many issues, they're exacerbated in rural counties. We just do not have the number of providers we need for the number of folks there. There's also a lack of specialty care providers. If I need to go see an oncologist, I'm not going to be able to go in my town of like 3,000 people to our local neighborhood oncologist. That's just not something you see. Transportation issues, public transport is notoriously unreliable in rural areas. I might be waiting all day for a bus. There's also a lot of higher need care. So one of our favorite little phrases when we're talking about rural health is that our rural populations are getting older, poorer, and sicker. So there's a lot of folks in those areas who have complex care needs. So it would make sense they'd need to go see a provider more often. And in these rural areas, that's just not there. There's also stigma, as I mentioned on the last slide, particularly when we're talking about mental health care and substance use disorder. So again, I'm in my town of 3,000 people. Even if I do have a behavioral health provider available, maybe the receptionist goes to my church and I don't want them to see me going into this place, just because the stigma that's still there around things like substance use disorder and mental health care. And there are associated costs, and these aren't just the cost of the appointment. This is the cost for I need to miss work. I need to find childcare for my children. I maybe need to pay like an Uber to get me there. So there are a number of barriers that, again, you don't find these just in rural communities, but they're often going to be heightened. So telehealth can be a great tool, not the only tool, but a great tool for overcoming a lot of these barriers. So you can see more providers through a telehealth visit than you would be able to see through who's within a 15-minute driving radius of me. That goes without saying. The same for specialists. If I need to see my oncologist, instead of having to drive a couple hours to the nearest large city, I can sit down and turn on my computer. Some people are also just more comfortable receiving care at home. There's privacy. Some people are more comfortable not having to go talk about things in an office with someone maybe they don't know very well. They can stay at home. They can have their support system there. And when we talk about more complicated care needs, there is remote patient monitoring available, a large number of different telehealth technologies and resources that can be used to help monitor care in really exciting ways. There's also the privacy that can help with the stigma that we mentioned before, as well as lower associated costs. I maybe don't have to take a whole day off work if I'm just doing a half-hour telehealth appointment at lunch. My kids can be in the other room while I'm on the telehealth appointment with my provider. So another thing that's really important to understand when we're talking about rural health, or telehealth, not just in rural areas, but overall, is that telehealth is not limited to just, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to talk to my GP, but over a computer. We have things like telebehavioral health and SUD treatment. We have hospital at home for people who are very sick. Remote patient monitoring, like I said, it's a favorite of mine, doing things like monitoring people with hypertension. And then we have things like e-consults between providers, which has become increasingly common and popular as it's a very effective way for providers to consult about their patients without necessarily having to be in the same place. We can do follow-up appointments. Like, I cannot conduct a surgery via telehealth. I can't get my appendix out over a telehealth appointment. But I can do a follow-up with my surgeon to make sure I'm recovering well. And then there are more sort of experimental or emerging sorts of telehealth. Teledentistry is one that's been very useful in our tribal populations as well as our more frontier areas where there just really is no way for folks to get connected with dentistry. And then we have things like store and forward, where we're storing information and sending it forward. And these are definitely not a whole list of every different telehealth specialty. There are tons, and there are more emerging every day as this continues to take up such a large part of our market share for healthcare. So now we're going to talk a little bit about telehealth access points. So you all can read, I'm not going to read this word for word, but essentially telehealth access points are alternative places where you're able to access telehealth outside of the home. And a lot of this ties to what we've been talking about today with limited broadband access and limited connectivity. If I don't have stable Wi-Fi in my home, my only option for telehealth is to do audio only, and the coverage on that is limited. So what am I gonna do? The best way to go about this is to find a telehealth access point. And that can be something like a library, a community center, a Veterans Affairs place. We've seen this be instituted in a number of different ways, where we find somewhere that has private spaces, technology, and broadband connectivity, and we're able to help folks get access to telehealth there. Yeah, so like I said, telehealth in libraries is going to be the most common alternative origination site we see for telehealth in libraries programs. But school-based telehealth is another one, as well as things like senior centers. We've seen people be very creative with this model, and it's been a great way for folks to become connected with telehealth if they don't have the connections readily available to them. So a good example of this, and I apologize for going back to Indiana, but this is a program that I have been involved with directly, so I know it the best. The Because You Matter program, sponsored by the IU School of Social Work. They have partnerships with, I believe, 11 different rural libraries in counties all over Indiana, where they've partnered with their students who have gone in, help train librarians on how we help people get access to telehealth. They provided private spaces, and people who would not have been able to receive behavioral health care otherwise are able to do that over telehealth. And like all telehealth, this has lent itself very well to behavioral health. That's something we've really seen as kind of our shining star in the realm of telehealth. It just lends itself very well to that format. So now we're going to talk a little bit about rural health and broadband. So over the past year, I have been lucky enough to be part of Indiana's Digital Equity Task Force, similar to the one here, where we are planning how to use our BEAD funding. And that has been an incredibly valuable experience because I've been able to get sort of a firsthand view on folks all throughout the state and how much they really struggle with not having access to reliable and high-speed broadband. So I'm coming at this from a telehealth angle, but obviously it affects far more than that. Sorry, I keep accidentally using the laser pointer. I'm sorry if I blind you in the front there, sir. That's not my intention. So we've talked a lot about the digital divide today, so I won't belabor the point. We all know what the digital divide is. It's not just having and not having technology, it's understanding how to use it, and it's having the connection to be able to use it. And like our previous presenters said, it's not something that we're going to be able to ever resolve entirely. That's just not realistic. But we do need to be cognizant of the fact that it is much more, it's a bigger divide when we're looking at our rural locations. We've got 72 versus 79% of folks who have that internet access, and 80 versus 89%. So we do see that there is a large gap between how many people are struggling with the digital divide in a more urban setting versus folks in a more rural setting. So when we're talking about this, we need to be cognizant of the fact that our rural populations, like all other barriers, this is something that is hitting them harder. So our barriers for rural populations so far as broadband access goes, we have these limited access to devices. Oftentimes we can't afford them or they just might not be available. We have limited internet connectivity and we just don't have the infrastructure there that we need to set up that internet. We talked about how the Appalachian, I'm sorry, I always say it wrong, part of Ohio really does struggle with being able to lay cable at all, lay fiber. That's something that we see in a lot of rural places. It's just not feasible for us to reach them when they're so geographically isolated. So our Ohio population breakdown as of now, about 11% of houses don't have an internet subscription. We've got an older population, which we know struggle more, generally speaking, with our digital divide. And we also have a large number of folks without health care. So when we're talking about these barriers, it's important to be aware of the parts of the population that are going to struggle with those more. So telehealth and accessibility, and that's what we're all here today to talk about. And I'm sorry, I'm running up on my time. I'm trying to be quick. So we've talked a lot about the BEAD program, and I won't go into this deeply because we're going to have a meeting this afternoon all about it. But not just in Ohio, but nationwide, this has been something that has such potential towards helping get folks connected with telehealth. We're excited not just for the states in my region, but for states across the country to really have this sort of once in a generation chance to be connected with broadband in a way that's going to make telehealth more accessible and is going to help alleviate a lot of those barriers that we talked about earlier. So I would be remiss in talking about telehealth without touching on the exciting, shiny future that we have waiting for us. So the integration of telehealth and AI is something that folks have become increasingly aware of and interested in. And in the telehealth space, we're very excited about how this is going to potentially take administrative work out of the hands of providers and put it in the hands of machines, so they have more time to focus on what they do best, which is provide care to patients. We're also looking at increased accessibility in the future, as well as being able to use telehealth in public crises responses. Like I said at the beginning of this presentation, next time somebody is in a call center and they're being asked, how do I connect with my provider despite the fact that I can't get to them physically, I really want telehealth to be the first thing that they mention or talk about, because it is such a good tool for being able to connect if you can't be somewhere physically. So like I said, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns ever about telehealth, please do feel free to connect with the Upper Midwest Telehealth Resource Center. We love talking to people. We love answering your questions. Or we just love it when folks sign up for our webinars, enjoy our podcast if you didn't get enough of me talking today, or subscribe to any of our social media channels. But aside from that, I think that's it for me. But thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. I'm very glad that I was able to share some of my favorite topics with you.
Thornfield to local hospitals, manufacturers, small businesses, or schools, Orba companies have been providing service to these locations for decades.
Orba members have been pioneers of communication technology since the early 1900s, in providing broadband technology and deploying fiber to rural communities of Ohio since the early 2000s.
Fiber connections have become vital in today's world, and the demand for faster options continue to rise.
Orba is a consortium of 25 independent communication service providers who have been providing service to rural Ohio for decades.
Orba companies are investing in the latest technologies to build and maintain state-of-the-art broadband networks for rural Ohioans.
This investment means many Ohioans now have the connections they need for education, agriculture, healthcare, and business.
Over the years, Orba members have provided unserved areas by burying over 10,000 miles of fiber to provide broadband to every one of their customers.
And they continue to expand their network by offering broadband services to neighboring communities.
Orba members have provided unserved areas with gigabit broadband service, which is like going from the horse and buggy to supersonic flight.
Looking ahead, Orba members continue to look for opportunities to improve and expand broadband access by leveraging private capital as well as federal and state programs.
Our members will continue to push forward and find ways to support and grow local economies.
Thanks to the Ohio Rural Broadband Association, the future looks bright for rural Ohio.
Good morning. I'm Lonnie Pedersen. I'm Chief Operating Officer at Telephone Service Company in Wapakoneta. And it's my privilege to introduce the next panel on broadband connectivity. Our moderator is going to be Peter Voderberg. Peter currently serves as the Chief of Broadband Ohio, an office within the Department of Development, dedicated to bringing high-speed internet service to every resident in Ohio. Created by Governor Mike DeWine, it serves as the access point for industry and the public for coordinating the state's broadband efforts. Peter has experience in all three branches of government. He has worked for 2 governors, the 3rd District Court of Appeals, and the Ohio Legislature. He earned a JD from the University of Dayton School of Law in 2012 and has a bachelor's degree in English from The Ohio State University. Also on the panel is Adrienne Bradley. Currently, Adrienne serves as the Director of Community Impact for ProMedica, where she oversees ProMedica's community-based social determinants of health strategy and community investment. In this role, she works across the business units and service areas and within system community leadership to understand and evaluate community need, develop population health strategies across service areas, and evaluate impact and links. Adrienne earned her BA in Communications from the University of Toledo and her Executive Master's degree in Organizational Development from Bowling Green State University. Also on the panel is David Zak. In May 2022, David Zak assumed the role of the President and CEO of the Crawford Partnership, a 501c3 public-private partnership dedicating to driving economic, community, and workforce development in Crawford County. He has been working in economic development for 28 years, leading an organization for 21 years. Previously, he served in leadership roles in Seneca, Clark, and Fairfield counties as the Ohio Economic Development Institute and has served on a board vice president of Northwest Ohio District for the Ohio Economic Development Association. During his career, he has helped support the creation of 18,000 jobs and $1.7 billion in investment. He is married, a father of 4 girls, a trail running enthusiast, and an inspiring wine scholar. Tom Korma, also on the panel, has an extensive experience over the past 2+ decades in housing and development across government healthcare, for-profit business, and nonprofit organizations. Most recently at Neighborhood Works, Toledo Region, as Director of Real Estate. Tom managed a program to acquire and renovate single-family homes, which were sold for home ownership, among other initiatives to help stabilize the neighborhoods. Tom has held previous positions with the City of Toledo in the Department of Neighborhoods, Economic and Community Development, and Public Utilities. Tom has participated on various boards and organizations over the years and resides in Point Place, Toledo. And our final panelist, Dr. Dawn Chenu. Dr. Dawn Chanou is the Dean of the College of Education and Human Development, a two-time alumna of BGSU. Dr. Chanou returned to the institution in 2012 as Director of the School of Teaching and Learning. She served in that capacity for 3 years before stepping into her role as Dean. Prior to coming to BGSU, Dr. Chanou spent almost 15 years at Washington State University as a faculty member and department chair. Dr. Chanou earned her PhD from Ohio State University. Would you welcome our panel?
All right, well, good morning, everyone. Great to see all of you here today. We appreciate being up here and having an opportunity to talk about one of the things that we talk about all the time, which is broadband deployment throughout the state of Ohio. So that was a wonderful introduction, so you know who all of us are now. So we're just going to go ahead and dive right in. So the first question I'm going to ask, this kind of goes to everybody, is really how has broadband access become more critical over time for each of your industries? We'll go down the line. That's how we'll start.
I think you're looking at me.
Yes, I am.
As the Dean of the College of Education and Human Development, you can imagine the impact. We've been talking about the pandemic and sort of the post-pandemic in education. I think we're not quite post-pandemic yet. We're still seeing learning loss, and we also had a collection of schools and educators who suddenly were shifting to online learning and seeing both the potential and the pitfalls of that. And so I think it has rocked us. I think the convergence of AI, which we heard a little bit about in the previous session, and coming out of the pandemic, I think we're going to see some pretty radical shifts in what it means to teach and learn with a much greater emphasis on personalized learning than we've ever been able to do in the past.
In economic development, there have been a number of critical ways that we've seen a tremendous impact. One is in site selection. When a company decides to locate an operation or an office or any kind of facility, recent study done by the International Economic Development Council has about 86% of site selectors, people helping those kinds of decisions, saying broadband access has a significant or at least some impact on the decision where they go, and we're seeing that in rural Ohio as well. I think what is particularly interesting post-COVID is that its impact on workforce and workforce development is even stronger in the sense that most companies would acknowledge that things aren't going to go back to how it was pre-pandemic. I think about 60% in a recent survey recognize that. At least half are evaluating rural opportunities as companies like Ford and Target and others sell their large office buildings because more and more people are working remotely. Here in Wood County, I think the most recent data is 11% of the entire workforce works remotely. In Delaware County, it's a third. And so even in the rural areas, we're seeing that greatly increase. We have a top 50 insurance company headquartered in Bucyrus in our little county of 42,000, and people come in, many of the people 1 day or 2 days a week, and that's common. So I think we'll see that even more so. Last but not least, I think quality of life. So it's what we use for everything. So if I'm gonna enjoy the rural lifestyle, I need to be able to connect remotely when I do remote work or et cetera. So there is a stronger sense in the rural communities that we gotta get it everywhere.
Yeah, I think like every sector, healthcare was significantly impacted, maybe the most by the pandemic. Telehealth has been around for some time now. Due to the pandemic, really everyone started using a lot more. We're seeing really great statistics that increase in broadband is actually increasing health outcomes for the better. And so specifically, I feel like the keyword is rural today, rural health, really access to those individuals, but also showing the far way that we still have to go within the rural community.
Great. Well, the other aspect would be
I think we have the access, and there's limited access in the rural, as was mentioned, but a different flair from, a different flair from what David was saying is everybody working remotely, but it's also now the ability for the workforce to be able to find jobs online. I think is also a huge, I wouldn't call it a detriment, but having people have access to be able to data mine where those jobs are, and then on top of that,
So you want to use mine?
they have to be able to put their resumes out online. They have to understand that those resumes are being, AI components are being used to review those resumes and be able to find a candidate for a job. So we need to make sure that the workforce that's applying for jobs are understanding that technology. I think is a huge thing that the community is going to have to evolve and understand as we go forward. And then the other aspect would be, again, is to have that access so when you're doing virtual interviews that you have good connection and you're able to be able to have an interview and understand what that working from home component is going to be like.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, I think, you know, we're seeing the internet impact more and more of our daily lives, right? We're seeing it impact everything from job searches to telehealth to education, like we're talking about, even entertainment, right? And I sometimes do this. I didn't do this at the beginning, but I'll do it now. Let me ask a question. Raise your hand in the audience if you have internet access in your home today. Look at that, all right? A majority of you. Now let me ask you another question. How does it feel when it goes out for an hour? Right? Think of how impacted your daily life is, whether it's, you know, like I said, entertainment, education, upscaling, you know, your job skills, you know, workforce, education, anything, how impacted we are if even it goes out for an hour. And that's how things are changing, right? Like the panelists said, like the impact that broadband has on our lives can't be overstated right now because it really impacts almost every facet of what we do. And let me ask that leads me to my next question, which is how has the availability and reliability of broadband access impacted your constituents, especially in remote or underserved area? And what challenges do you face for skills, digital skills, and access? So we're going to start with David. We'll start there.
So it's certainly a challenge. I mean, in the most recent analysis, I think that, you know, they look at the area. We got about 80% of the area doesn't have access to 25.3, but it's really about 26% of the population. But I think what's even more significant than that is that if you look at the amount of people that have access to 100 megabits or more, that's almost none. And so I think that those folks, when you're doing virtual meetings, when you're doing education virtually and many, many other things, we don't have. It's not only about having access or broadband access, it's about high-speed access, just the programs and the things we use. And so I think that it's certainly a challenge and an obstacle for the population. And then as far as just being able to access it and have the skills, equipment, and you know, what many people who are working a lot on crossing the digital divide are trying to encounter. How do you continue to work in areas that don't have that in addition to the infrastructure to get people acclimated?
All right, Adrian, we'll keep going down the line.
All right, I'll piggyback off that. So unfortunately, the population that I work with, the vulnerable rural populations, the ones who could benefit the most from telehealth, are still having difficulty getting access to broadband, being able to afford internet. And so that's, you know, I've heard the term, I work in social determinants of health, so 80% of your healthcare is actually where you live, work, and play. And so broadband access has really been dubbed almost a super determinant of health. Really important. So when we need access to a doctor, we might not have it. We can't drive to it. Oh, just hop online. Well, we can't hop online. We're not able to do that. And so that really is an approach that, so telehealth offers an enormous approach, but when you don't have access to the one thing to be able to access telehealth, which is broadband, it becomes an issue.
And at a slide we saw earlier, I think that there's 3 circles and I think that we've done a lot to help with the accessibility, and there's been programs for affordability. But the third, I think the most important circle, and those other ones have a lot of need there, is the adoptability. So we're dealing with public that needs that navigator to be able to help them through and access the internet. so they can access all these quality programs with the telehealth, or they're able to access the internet for online applications for jobs. But that need for that education for those that are not necessarily as tech savvy as others is probably one of the most important things. So I know a lot of discussion has already taken place, and that internet navigator that we have deployed throughout the communities in different formats is going to continue to be a key component of success for these programs going forward.
And I think I was sitting here thinking back at the beginning of the pandemic, all of the educator preparation programs in the state of Ohio realized that most of us didn't have a single class about how to teach online. So you can imagine, and that was true, right, for generations of teachers. And so that shift, I think we still are grappling with how do we prepare a workforce who is able to utilize those and ensure, particularly in regions that are going to rely even more heavily. There's a teacher shortage, particularly in areas like world languages and chemistry and physics and advanced mathematics. And one solution would be to have one really well-qualified teacher who's delivering things virtually to some of those rural communities, and that requires a lot of bandwidth. But then also, you need to have people in the schools who know how to support that online teacher and do the hands-on things that we also know are critically important for learners. So I think the challenges are going to be with us for a while.
No, that's a great observation. So let me kind of piggyback off of that and ask this as a follow-up question and say, what are the industries doing to not only, it was one thing during the pandemic to kind of push everybody at home and be like, hey, we'll figure this out, right? Like, we'll figure out how to do your job, how to do your education, how to do schoolwork or telehealth or whatever job you have from home. But are we shifting? Are we shifting to actually train people how to teach online, to train people how to work online, to train people how to do telehealth online? Like, what are some of those changes that are happening in the industry? And Dr. I'll go back to you to start off, since you kind of spearheaded this question.
Sure. So one of the things that we did, and actually started in the middle of the pandemic, was to work with tutoring online. So we recognized quickly that there were going to be students who, especially those who were still doing entirely online learning. And so we worked with a grant from Medical Mutual and started an online tutoring. And that's an example where one-on-one, that's a very focused kind of attention. And if our candidates and teachers know how to do that well, it can be a really engaging resource for students that will help to address some of those learning gaps. Ironically, some of the obstacles, though, are resistance in accrediting bodies. I know in the middle of the pandemic, as we were trying to flip all of our internships and things, an accrediting body that does our clinical mental health program was the least open to counting hours that could be delivered via telehealth counseling sessions. And yet we know from everything you've heard today and everything the industry is saying, that's going to be one of the rapidly growing areas. And so it's going to take a while to get everybody on the same page, I think.
Yeah, I think it continues to be a struggle, but sometimes in the reverse. I think that in many industries, for example, manufacturing, you can't make a widget at home, right? But if you look at white-collar work, it's more how do you get them back in the office? So people did figure it out. People did and enjoyed. I think we're going to see the same thing with AI as well, as people begin to figure out different ways to work. So I think the question gets to become almost a digital and technology divide among those who are utilizing the technology, and you're going to see a competitive advantage. But companies are struggling. Honestly, they're trying to figure out how to do it while they're managing their business. And I don't have any thoughts in my head and nor do I have those kinds of deep conversations. But I would say that what we're generally hearing out in the environment is that companies are struggling with how to find a balance to make it work, to make take advantage of it while not losing company culture and connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for us, every day looks different. Not only are we facing just everyday change, but also an extreme workforce shortage with our direct care individuals, and so it's really hard for them to also, help someone get online and figure out their telehealth appointment. We do have a community-based team. We have a brick and mortar center located in Uptown. We do offer digital literacy classes. We have a high rise of older adults. We specifically started with them to really, learn how to use a computer, how to send an email, how to, get the link to your telehealth appointment. So little steps in that way is kind of where we're at right now.
Well, I guess to add that for all the companies that are doing more and more online, and it's all that portal access, and to make sure that to do it well is that they have culturally competent people that are dealing with all sorts of the population, and whether it's lower or higher income. I think a lot of times you have difficulty in being able to call somebody when you have a problem, that they say, oh, just refer to the website. And then they have to, I think companies need to understand that there's folks that are not as connected, or they won't be able to get connected. So they'd be able to look at their offerings across many different sorts of platforms to make sure that they're able to hit the entire community, so that we're all benefiting from whatever their technology or their business or whatever product they happen to be selling, so that we're able to, everybody benefit from the whole digital opportunity.
No, that's great. Actually, a funny story about that. So, talking about making sure that you can have multiple ways of communicating with the population and making sure that you can reach into the community. When we were doing a challenge process for the Federal Communication Commission's mapping efforts that were done over last summer, the only way that you could challenge whether your address had internet access or not was to go online and say that you didn't have internet access. So the literal only way to challenge your internet access capability was to be online, to say it didn't exist. So to fix that, what we did at Broadband Ohio, recognizing that, is we actually sent out literal paper copies of a survey that said, do you have internet access? If you don't, mail this back to us and we'll fill it out for you. And we worked with our library councils and our libraries all across the state to make sure that someone had the understanding in your libraries to be able to help you walk through that process in case the map said you had internet access when you really didn't. But it's a struggle, right? Because we just assume anymore, right? We just assume like, oh, you have a computer, you have internet, so everything's on a website, everything's in a database, and we've seen that isn't the case, right? We, like the previous panelists were saying, there are still some issues with the digital divide in Ohio that we're going to be working on over the next few years. So. But I'm going to take a step back for a second. We're going to talk for a second about the last panel. Adrian, I'm going to go to you first and talk a little bit about, telehealth has become increasingly important, as we just heard, right? Especially in light of the pandemic. And how has the expansion of broadband access affected healthcare delivery in your day-to-day? And what challenges remain in ensuring that widespread adoption of telehealth services exists?
Yeah, so I think it's been great in some aspects where Medicaid has always covered telehealth. Medicare has not. So since the pandemic, Medicare has now started allowing individuals to see specialists and things of that nature. I think one thing is quality of care is being questioned. Danielle, I think, mentioned in the last panel, we're not saying, skip seeing your PCP and just do a telehealth visit. That doesn't make sense. It's not always appropriate. I have a 1 and a 5-year-old. I can't imagine the anxiety I would have trying to sit on a telehealth visit with them, trying to get them to pay attention, things like that. So, I think while we're seeing a lot of good things that happened from COVID and allowing the healthcare system to really transition in the work that we're doing, it's, telehealth in general isn't always the answer.
Well, I think, and let me kind of expand that out to the rest of the panel. Are you seeing in your fields a hesitancy, especially now that the pandemic is over, are you seeing people kind of go backwards? In other words, are you seeing some people go like, like you were mentioning, right? Like you can't build a widget at home, but some of the white collar office buildings, they're bringing people back in. So are we seeing kind of a reverse? Are we seeing that this is a new norm, or how, what are you seeing in this area, especially in your own respective fields? Like, what are you seeing happen in the area? Tom, we're going to go down to you first. We'll start with you.
I think I'm seeing more of a hybrid. So depending on the industry, obviously, as we mentioned, widgets, you're going to be in your factory or in your institution or whatever. But there's more of a hybrid model where you're still building that team approach in person and being able to address, the day-to-day and with individuals face-to-face, but then you're also then the opportunity to work from home. I think it goes a lot to quality of life that people have gotten used to in the last couple of years, that they're able to manage a work-life balance, and by being able to work from home and cut down that commute time. I know, in Lucas County, Toledo, we don't have a terrible commute, which is great. But in some of the larger cities where people choose to live, that they do have a long time, going back and forth. So I think you're going to continue to see that hybrid. And so it's kind of like the new norm.
Great. We're going to come back to David now. We're doing it this way.
Yeah, I can completely echo what Tom said. I think it's particularly highlighted due to the really hyper-competitive labor market that we have. So there are a lot of companies who, even in this hyper-competitive labor market, have shifted to being a lot more selective, which you wouldn't think made sense. But I think when everybody was looking for workers, they went through, especially coming off of COVID, it was like, we'll hire anybody with a pulse. And then what they found out is they brought them in, they trained them, and then you got a number of people that kind of job hop to other opportunities. And so what they're doing is they're looking, and we see this across multiple industries, being a lot more selective about who they hire. In order to attract the people that they want to hire, they have to offer remote, generally speaking. Everybody at least once one day. In my own organization, we never did that. I've been doing it a long time, but you have to offer it. And so I think you're going to see that become very important as companies realize that the cost of bringing somebody on board and integrating them in and then losing them can be not only damaging from a productivity standpoint, but also from a culture standpoint and what it feels like to be in that company. So I echo everything Tom said and then add that as well.
Doctor.
I was just thinking that I think we were all, especially if you had small children at home, we were all ready for them to be back at school after the pandemic. And so but I think it would be a lost opportunity for us to go entirely back to where we were. And so I think while the hybrid may be a little different, I don't foresee a time when you might have children 2 days a week working from home hybrid. That's not going to happen. But I think within classrooms, what we're going to see is an increased use of technology to help to individualize instruction. So if you think about many of us, I'm looking around the room, probably we remember those learning stations that might have happened in classrooms. I can imagine a learning station where some of that is going to be driven actually by AI, working with individual students. Well, while you have a group over here working on phonemic awareness, there are some good computer programs that can do those kinds of things and work with students to adjust to their abilities quickly so that they continue to be challenged and remediation can happen while the teacher is working with another group on a very discrete set of skills over here. So I think it will be hybrid in what I think could be really exciting opportunities, but probably still having all of the, especially young learners in one location with a teacher who needs to be well prepared to manage that kind of classroom.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you a follow-up on that. So do you also see, some schools have the capability of having everything from AP courses to foreign languages and things like that, and other schools don't have those capabilities. Do you see, internet access and this possibility of talking to each other remotely, an opportunity for students to, even if you're in a school district that doesn't have an AP class, maybe being part of an AP class that another school is putting on? Is that a possibility going into the future?
Yeah, I think that in that way it could be the great equalizer. There's was a Brookings Institute editorial that talked about the real digital divide that we're going to face now is not just having the technology or knowing how to use the technology, but having the people who can support the use of that technology in really new and innovative ways. And I think that's going to be the challenge facing schools.
Great. Well, thank you. So then I am going to take that one step further now and say, so the BEAD program, the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, is designed to get me out of a job because by 2030, every single household all across the state of Ohio should be able to have at least one provider that can give you high-speed internet access. It's 100 megabits per second download speed and 20 megabits per second upload speed. You'll learn more about that in our broadband meeting after this. But the reason I'll be out of a job is because in 5 years, we'll either all all have broadband and I don't need to be here, or we won't have broadband and you should fire me anyway. So one way or the other, we're working my way towards not working in government anymore. But once we've done that, right? So the idea will be that there will be a point in time in the near future where every household will have the ability to have access. We're not going to force anyone to take it, right? But every household will have the ability to have access. So what does the future look like, right? So when there isn't, when that part is solved, when availability itself is solved, meaning that every single person could have it if they wanted it, what could the future look like? Well, how will that change industry, right? Well, how will that make it different, whether it be from education or healthcare or workforce? So, and we'll start in healthcare. We'll start back with you, Adrienne.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't see a future where every vulnerable population will have that access. When you think about the homeless population, the population that really needs access to healthcare and doesn't get it, they're likely not going to have a computer. They likely won't have internet access. But I think that's why it's important that we partner with organizations like our library. The Toledo Library is amazing. They are doing very innovative things that traditionally wouldn't be in their realm. I think they have and I'm going to speak hopefully correctly, where individuals can go into the library and see a practitioner. So I think thinking strategically, but also it will mean access to a lot of other folks as well. So,
sure, we'll go down the line. Tom, we'll go to you.
I guess I'll try another aspect of it for the workforce is that as a basis of all this new installation and antennas and access and towers and that, there's going to be a lot of jobs. So hopefully we're connecting those jobs to our communities and that everybody in the community has access to these jobs. So as I indicated earlier, we're putting more of those, everything's online and all that access, but for those that are currently not as connected to that broadband, we need to make sure that we're still getting to them. So we're providing those job opportunities so then they're making a higher level of wage and earnings so that they can afford their broadband and be part of the revolution of the internet. So my hope would be is that all of the partners continue to collaborate closely and that we're going to need to pivot as we go forward because this is evolving and changing as we go. So every time that we think that we need to pivot this way, then we got to look at the outcome of that or unintended consequences so that we can re-pivot again and make sure that we're hitting that mark. So we're no longer just hitting a target, we're hitting the bullseye as we go forward. So that would be my hope is that that all these communities and all of our citizens are taking advantage of the opportunities that are out there.
Great. Doctor? We'll come back to you, Dr. Schneewel.
So I think one of the most exciting byproducts of that dream being realized is that you're going to see, I think, a surge in folks wanting to live in rural environments. I think the demographic trends over the last umpteen number of years has been urbanization, and then some would argue suburbanization and urban sprawl. But the idea was that if I really want access to people, if I want access to information, if I want access to capital, if I want access to quality of life, I have to be in a larger urban center to get that. I think the part of it is, wow, now I can work remotely, I can start a business remotely. You're going to see a trend in the development of co-working and incubator spaces in rural Ohio. JP Nassif at a recent listening session, I asked him the question, what do you see the biggest opportunities for rural Ohio? And he's like, incubating in co-working spaces. And we're starting one in Crawford County because you get that discount of 15 to 20% less the average cost of living in America. You get the sense of being in a smaller community where you're working together to build the community. I grew up in Toledo, I lived in Columbus, loved those kind of areas. But there's a special quality of life in a smaller area. Now, if everybody's got available access, whether you want your 10 acres and a farm or a house here at a much more affordable, half to 1/3 the cost, it's going to really open up opportunities for rural communities to develop like never before while still retaining their quality of life.
Great. So I think, I completely agree. I think that as we discussed, that broadband and high-speed internet really does have this opportunity to equalize all the different regions, right? Because you can have access to high-quality healthcare, high-quality education, high-quality workers, pretty much anywhere in the country, and to a degree, anywhere in the world, right? So you have these new capabilities. But Adrienne, you touched on something, and I want to come back to this for a second, which is, the barriers, right? Like it doesn't just because, and like I said, right, we'll make sure that everyone has the availability of internet access, but we aren't going to make anyone take it. So what are some of those barriers that you're going to see that will still keep people from kind of tapping into this modern economy that we're talking about? And Tom, we'll actually start with you all the way down at the end, and then come back this way.
Well, I started with it. It's the adoption. I mean, the barrier is going to be is just making sure they know how to use it. So as we continue to evolve, I think the younger generation are you know, they're born with a laptop in their hands, you know, or a cell phone. And so I think some of this will evolve over time, you know, but there's a portion of our communities that, you know, you have people that are just not tech savvy. And so it's just going to continue to have that need to be able to educate people on how to use it. I think that there was mentioned earlier about, you know, somebody's like a proxy for a family member. So we're all probably, those that are more tech savvy than others, you know, we all know that we've probably been a proxy before. My mom and my stepdad they do not have access in the house. They don't feel the need for it. They have a cell phone, so what limited access they need is done by their phone. In fact, they had a telehealth appointment just within the last couple of weeks, and because of, and knowing how disconnected they are, because of the cultural competent person that they worked with on the phone that helped them get set up and make sure that the camera was on and that they could hear each other, it ended up being a very successful interaction. But if you don't have the right person on the other side of that line, then I think we're going to have a disconnect. You're going to have people steering away from those opportunities. So I think it's going to be an ever evolving, and I think that the need for that navigator type system out there as the backbone to support everyone is going to be there for a long time.
Great. We'll keep coming this way.
I think it's access, and a lot to what Tom said. There's also a lot of trust issues, I think, with some of the population that I see. You know, my phone can hear us talk. I don't want to talk about my health issues. So AI, while is so cool and plays such a cool part in all of this, there's things that some of us, that when we benefit from this work, we don't take into consideration what other people might want to stay very clear away and far away from. One population too we're seeing is individuals that speak English as a second language. A lot of folks aren't trained in cultural competency and things like that, and so there's issues that while we're seeing, telehealth is great, we're also seeing a lot of things that are becoming barriers, like needing to train our workforce more in cultural competency, the need to meet people where they're at a little bit more, having a little bit more patience and grace, maybe if someone isn't gung-ho about telehealth and doesn't have access.
Yeah, I would add to all that. I still think affordability is going to be an issue because you don't pay for different qualities of water. Now, some people can put a water softener system, but as far as electricity and heat and the other utilities, you're not paying for, generally speaking, quality of natural gas or any of those other things. It's heat and you pay one rate. But if I'm deciding, $8 to $100 a month to have high-speed internet access for a number of families, we have like 15% poverty rate in our county. Those families aren't going to be able to afford that, even if it's accessible. So I think, and I don't know the answer to that, but I do think affordability in terms of getting the 100 megabit per second speeds is going to be an issue, and hopefully technology will continue to improve and drive that down. But I think that's something you're going to see in public policy circles talking, and is being talked about, of how to address the affordability issue.
And I would just add, I think, in addition to access for schools, right, technology changes quickly. Those of us who use technology regularly know that devices can quickly become outdated, and for schools, that kind of investment to keep it current, and as the capacity and the demand increases, they need to update equipment regularly, and I think that that's going to be a considerable expense and challenge. And I also do appreciate the concern about security, right? Particularly for children, and ensuring that those are safe spaces, I think will be a priority for schools and families.
Sure. No, I agree. I mean, I think, all great points, touching on the affordability, obviously, with the Affordable Connectivity Plan that exists today, but is not going to be existing in the near future without intervention from Congress. It is a hard, it's a hard subject it's a hard truth, I should say, that one of the plans that we have going forward may not be around, right? That it may not exist to be able to help with the program. I can say that right now, in our initial proposal, Volume 2, for the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, which has all that money, the state of Ohio does have a requirement that even in the absence of the Affordable Connectivity Program, that providers have a $30 a month option, even if ACP goes away for those who would be eligible. But I can even say, talking about affordability, even with $30 a month, if it's $30 a month on you, we're going to have about 10% of Ohio's population who may not be able to afford that. So if you take for granted that about 2% of your income is something that you might be able to pay towards internet, $30 a month, about 10% of folks can't afford it, right? So it is something that we're going to need to talk about and continue to talk about, and making sure that we continue to be, at the forefront of making sure that our teachers know how to use the technology as it comes out, and our healthcare providers know how to use it, and our administrators know how to teach people how to use it on the other end, right? And then making sure that we have digital navigators who can talk to all different people from all different walks of life for how to grab a computer, use it, get online, and do the things they need to do, right? These are all valid points, and I appreciate it. So now that you've all brought these wonderful points up, let me ask you the follow-up question that you knew was inevitable, which is, in what ways can public and private institutions leverage broadband connectivity to bridge the digital divide in some of these issues, right? So what are some successful strategies that you may know of, or you may even be employing, or that you've seen that may work to tackle some of these issues? So David, we're going to start with you again. We're going to go down to you to start.
Yeah, it's like world peace question, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do you solve this? I mean, in the realm in which I'm operating, we're not really getting down into how are you solving those kinds of issues. What I will say is what we're working on at the economic development level is trying to facilitate public-private partnerships to increase broadband infrastructure. So you're seeing a lot of innovation in trying to provide better information so the private providers can go after, some of the RDOF and other grants that are out there to increase infrastructure where it's not viable to do so. I think also just facilitating a conversation to make people aware of what the issues are, knowing that it's a long-term important thing that you got to work on, just like housing development or general community development, that we have to make this a critical community issue that we're going to be working on long-term. It's not just going to be for the length of your job, whatever it is. But yeah, I would just say in economic development, we're really working on trying to awareness among political leaders, among business leaders, not only as they're dealing with their own individual issues, but how do we get together collectively as a community to see what we can do to address some of these big challenges.
I think David said it perfectly. I think business, NGOs, nonprofits, community, working with everyone and together. And I also think listening to the folks more who are actually being affected by the problem. I don't think we do that enough. I don't think we seek to understand what folks are really facing. And so I think that's a big piece of the problem as well.
So I guess on a slightly different take would be the housing opportunities that are available. So as we're developing affordable housing or apartment complexes and making sure that the developers are required to put infrastructure into these developments to make it easier access, so it's not as much of a barrier, or they have to go out and individually sign up for broadband access where it can be provided at a more discounted rate on the entire building. So I think that there's different ways that we can work cooperatively, whether it's local ordinances or planning and things like that, to better wire the neighborhoods and make it easier. Because usually it's, when you can buy it in a mass, like an apartment complex, you can get better deals. So if we can just work a little bit smarter and cooperatively, public and private, I think it'll make it easier over the long term. Because like we've all said, the internet isn't going away. It's going to continue to get more and more and more. The portals, the access, everything's going to be online. So everything that we're thinking about, in let's say pre-development and a housing aspect, needs to have that connectivity needs to be first and foremost in that conversation. So it's thought on the front end and not on the back end.
Great.
The only thing I would say, there's nothing to add except the importance of talking across groups. I mean, one of the reasons I appreciate these kinds of opportunities, it puts people in a room together to talk about challenges and opportunities who may not be talking to each other regularly. And without organizations that do that, it's easy for us to work in our silos and do the best of what we're doing, and it might make a lot of sense until you talk to somebody who's doing something similar and doing it in a different way, and we don't do enough of that. So I appreciate the opportunity and the discussion today.
Great. Well, that actually leads me into my next question, which is, events like this are great, right? Where we have an opportunity to meet each other, talk to each other, talk about the things that we're doing and how we can make sure that we have, broadband access and coverage and digital skills. But once we leave, right, once we actually go back out to our daily jobs, our daily lives, what can we do to make sure that policymakers and community leaders and industry stakeholders collaborate across these sectors to develop comprehensive strategies that address the unique needs while promoting overall community well-being? Stated differently, right? How do we make sure that we keep having these conversations? What can you have a whole host of folks that are out here right now that want to know how they can keep making this work a reality so that we have that access, we have the skills, we have everything we need. So Tom, we're going to start with you. We're going to come back this way.
Well, I think a lot of the infrastructure has been put in place, like we talked about with, our Toledo Lucas County Library's got a great, they mentioned 40 partners. There could be more. So I would say is let's take this great work that we've done and the data that we're collecting and let's build on that. And how can we further connect to the neighborhoods and making sure that those folks that are in need of this, that don't already have it, for those that might not have raised their hand, that I have a computer at home and I have, ultimate access at home. For those that don't, those people need to be in the room, and that we need to be able to talk to them and figure out how best to be able to hit that community, that neighborhood, that street level. So just making sure that all the right people are at the table, helping be part of the solution, because I know public and private, they're good at doing for, and we need to be doing more with. So I think as long as we take an approach that it's an all-inclusive approach for the communities that we work in, that we'll have better outcomes.
I think our policymakers are very busy and have a lot on their plate, and oftentimes might seem a little out of touch with, again, the vulnerable populations and the folks that they're affecting. So I think sharing stories and just advocating for those that we can.
I think there are a lot of different ways to do it. One thing that we had the opportunity to do a couple years back was create a rural broadband task force in the county and invite the private providers to the table, as many as would want to come, the elected officials all the way down, whether it's school officials or it's township officials, and obviously municipal leaders as well. And some business folks and some citizens. And then what we did is we developed a strategic plan. So the group collectively, especially with the input of the private providers, put together an RFP to go out and select someone. Strategic plan was done, not in that community anymore, but I think the idea was that strategic plan is not only assessing what your gaps are, right? It's like, what are you going to do about it at different levels in different areas? And then hopefully that group can convene on everybody's got too many meetings, right? Death by meetings. But, is it a quarterly basis, just touch base on where we're at and allow people to facilitate the kind of conversations that Diane was talking about that we don't have enough of, so that it can continually be worked on over time, which I think, being an incrementalist myself, is really, really important. And you have those strategic conversations intentionally, because I think organically they don't happen.
Sure.
And I would just remind you, look to your local school partners. I see a couple of them in the room here, and I think those are critical voices to have at the table. In the end, what's happening in schools has an incredible impact on all of our futures, and so I think ensuring that students not only have access, but they have the computer equipment that they need, whether that's a handheld device or whatever it's going to look like. And then the teacher training, I think, is going to continue to be a challenge for us. So I think it's a great start to a conversation, and if the conversation goes well, our world should look different 10 years from now, because they sure look different than they did even 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm. That's very true. All right, well, let me ask one kind of last question from me, and then we may have time to take one or two from the audience. But let me ask this question, which is, with all these folks in the audience that are here, we've talked about a lot of stuff, but what is one thing that you would want them to take away, right? So one thing about the future, or about the problem, or about something that they should really continue to think about. What's one takeaway you'd like them to have from this panel, from your perspective? Dr. Purcell, with you.
I would say try not to be resistant. It's easy for those of us who maybe didn't grow up or don't use technology as much as others. I think it's easy to be afraid of it, and I don't think it's a time for us to be afraid. I think it's a time for us to utilize the skills and the tools at our fingertips, right? Because I think it's going to make it has the potential to make our worlds better if we use it wisely.
I think the one takeaway I would leave is that there's a huge opportunity for rural communities as this continues to progress. And I think we're going to, hopefully, a lot of us in the rural communities are going to be able to take advantage. What used to be seen as the challenge, and I think there are still those challenges, but I think we're going to see huge opportunities to see growth and development and quality of life in rural communities in Ohio.
I would say pull up a seat to the table. Different viewpoints and perspectives are always welcome. And the more people that we can put around this topic, I think the better.
Well, I guess we started with President Rogers. I think one of his comments was about collaboration. So I think that's the key, is making sure that we have the right people and the stakeholders and the public at the table. And then understanding that this is going to be an ever-evolving thing. So we need to be able to pivot as the data and as the outcomes change. And so we just have to know that this is going to be an ever-changing, evolving thing. Nobody knows where we're going to be at 20 years from now. We can all guess it. But we need to make sure that we continue to, the players are going to change at the table, and then we need to make sure that everybody's realizing who's there, who's not, and so that, the tides, rise for everyone.
Great. Thank you. Well, I think we have 1 or 2 minutes left still. I don't know if there's a question from the audience. All right, in the back. Sure. So cybersecurity, I think, is the question. So in each of your industries, how is cybersecurity either built in from the beginning, or how are you talking about it now? And Adrian, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so obviously HIPAA with healthcare, but it's always going to be a huge issue. I think there are a lot of rules and regulations that come along with HIPAA, and then as a healthcare system, we have a very large IT team, very big infrastructure, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's non-penetratable. Like, you can still get in. So I don't know, it's probably not a good answer. I don't think we have a perfect answer, in healthcare yet, but we're doing what we can, which is pretty solid.
Sure. Tom?
I mean, I think it's going to be part of that as people are learning how to navigate in the internet and in this world, that they need to take precautions and be able to, listen to the professionals that are telling them how to take those. And, whether it's the different softwares that are available, and there's a lot of software that's available at little to no cost in order to protect your system, so you don't have to go out and buy, a really expensive, software system in order to be able to protect yourself, especially for the average, residential type user. And then the companies, we all know, the two-party, two-factor verifications, and it seems like it's never ending, or I'll be halfway through a Zoom, or all of a sudden it's like, hey, we want to verify it's you. So there's some frustration points, it seems like, on occasion, but it's here. It's the cybersecurity is needed, and people just need to make sure that they're aware and they protect themselves.
Yeah, I think I would add to that. I think a couple of things. One, we're seeing with companies who haven't been on board with getting cybersecurity insurance, that's becoming a whole huge industry itself that's really not been adopted yet, but is happening fast and furiously, especially with small and medium-sized companies. And then I think there are huge educational opportunities. I think whether it's BG or Tiffin University, where I came from, that has a Center for Cyber Defense and Forensics, it's a whole new skill set and training and education to be added in this very complex, dangerous and world that provides an opportunity for growth, an opportunity for jobs, and just a whole new realm of doing business.
And while it's not cybersecurity, I think the way you might be thinking about in terms of protection of data, what we tell school partners and what we do internally is if you wouldn't have someone working with a child in a classroom, then you shouldn't have somebody working online with that student either. So all the background checks, everything that we do, we keep doing those things because we want to know who's working with young children, all children, regardless of whether it's virtually or in person.
That's great. And I think too, when we, for the BEAD program especially, we have some cybersecurity components that are built in through the application process that the internet service providers will have to say that they're complying with their federal standards, but we're thinking about it from the beginning too. So it's a great question. So with that, I do want to thank my panelists very much. Let's everybody give them a round of applause for the great job that they've done. Thank you for taking time today to be with us. We appreciate being here, and that concludes the panel. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Enjoying it.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for all of our speakers and our panelists. I want to remind everyone the Broadband Ohio meeting, regional meeting, is directly across the foyer here in the multi-purpose room. The meeting will start at 12:15. For those who registered, your lunch is provided there. If you did not register but still want to attend, you're more than welcome to, but we probably won't have enough lunch for everybody. But the union downstairs does have food. So if you want to stay and you didn't plan, you can definitely grab something to eat and come on over. But we welcome everyone to come to the meeting. You have about 20 minutes to relax, do what you want to do. You can hang out in here, you can head over there, whatever you want to do. Thank you.